The pre-wedding party for my son was held in a fancy restaurant in downtown Charleston. I stood quietly in a corner, watching my son happy, my heart full of pride. Then the bride-to-be walked over, her smile as bright as the lights but her eyes cold as ice. She leaned in and whispered, "After tomorrow, you won't be part of this family anymore." I went numb. Laughter still filled the room, glasses clinked. No one knew that in that moment, my world collapsed. She curled her lips, her voice low and mocking. "You've done your job," raised him. "Now let me take over." All my life as a single mother, I thought I'd survived the worst nights yet. I had never felt so humiliated. I just smiled, the kind of smile you wear when you know a storm is coming, then slipped out under the bright lights. No one knew that from that second on, I started moving, and what would collapse the next day wouldn't be me, but her dream wedding. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Eleanor Shaw, 66, a retired nurse, living alone in a small house on the outskirts of Charleston, where the sea breeze still slips through the windows on late afternoons, and the lavender I planted by the porch still lingers in the air. For 30 years, I lived for my only son, Nathan Shaw. When my husband left for another woman, Nathan was 6. That night, he held my hand and asked, "Where's Dad going, Mom?" I just hugged him and lied, "Dad's on a work trip, he'll be back." But he never came back. From then on, I was both father and mother. By day, I worked in the ER where people fight for every breath. By night, I picked up extra shifts at a nursing home. Some nights after clocking out, I sat in the car in the parking lot, hands still shaking from exhaustion, and still remembered to swing by the grocery store for milk for Nathan. I got used to the smell of disinfectant and the sound of ventilators. I got used to cold sandwiches for lunch, and to being so tired I forgot my own birthday. Also, my son would never feel lacking. And Nathan, the boy with the same brown eyes as mine, never let me down. He studied hard, behaved, and had a kind heart. I remember him helping poorer classmates, or standing up for kids who were bullied. He once said, "I'm going to be a lawyer so I can protect people who can't protect themselves like you always protect me." I cried that day, not from exhaustion, but from pride. When Nathan grew up, I thought I'd weathered everything. And then, when he brought home Isabella Green, I wanted to believe she was a good one. Isabella worked in marketing, young, beautiful, confident, well put together, the kind of woman I thought my son would be happy with. I truly wanted to love her like a daughter. But from the very first meeting, I felt something was off. She looked around my house, small, tidy, full of memories, with the eyes of someone appraising it. When I served dinner, she took a nibble and put the knife down. "You cook this yourself?" "That's great. Nathan says you like hands-on work." That wasn't a compliment. It cut like a small, cold blade. I forced a smile and kept my manners. After that, every time we met, she wore a mask, sweet in front of my son, indifferent and chilly when we were alone. She never asked about my life, or the years I spent raising Nathan. She only talked about herself, projects, friends, cocktail parties, luxury vacations. I thought maybe it was a generational difference. I was wrong. For the 2 years they dated, I was rarely included in anything. When they got engaged, Isabella announced she'd handle everything to keep it modern. I was invited to one dress fitting just to sit in the hallway. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, you just show up on the day and look elegant." I nodded and swallowed my tears. I still tried to believe she would change. I even spent a month making a wedding gift, a scrapbook of Nathan's life, from his first steps to college graduation, to the day he wore his law school regalia. I thought when Isabella saw it, she'd understand who Nathan really is, and the love I have for my son. But that night, when I brought the scrapbook to the rehearsal party, everything turned. The fancy restaurant hummed with jazz and the scent of wine. People toasted, took pictures, laughed while I stood in a corner holding the gift. Nathan was talking with coworkers, and Isabella, glowing like a queen, was in the middle of her friends. I walked up and said softly, "Isabella, I have something for you too." She turned, the perfect smile still on her face. But when she saw the book in my hands, her eyes dimmed. "I made this for for Nathan," I stumbled. "A memory book for you two to look through together." She didn't take it. Instead, she tilted her head, leaned in, and spoke low enough that only I could hear, "After tomorrow, you won't be part of this family anymore." Then she smiled, the kind of perfect smile you give after saying something cute. My heart pounded like someone was squeezing it. She went on, mocking, "You've done your job, raised him. Now let me take over. As for you, rest. No need to worry." I stood frozen, still clutching the scrapbook, afraid that if I let go, I'd fall apart too. Around us, people laughed and took photos, not realizing that in that bright room, a mother was being stripped of her place on her own son's happy night. I left the party without remembering whether I said goodbye. I drove home in silence. Charleston's streets still glowed, couples walked by hand in hand. And there I was, alone in my car, listening to the heavy thud of my own heartbeat. At home, I set the scrapbook on the table. I opened to the first photo, Nathan at 4, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a toy fish, and the tears just fell. I had done everything to give him a good life, to keep him safe from harm. And now the person I hoped would be my daughter-in-law was the one breaking my heart. I sat up all night, staring at the book and thinking of the years gone by. Overnight shifts, late tuition payments, sprinting home just to hug him before he fell asleep. All that effort, now reduced to one word: excess. When dawn broke, I wiped my tears, closed the book, and pushed it under the bed. "No," I whispered, "she doesn't get to rewrite this story, not while I'm alive." I picked up my phone, opened notes, and typed, "June 17th rehearsal party." She said I'm no longer family. I started recording everything: words, actions, expressions, anything I felt needed to be kept. Not for revenge, but because I had a feeling, one day the truth would need to be told. I didn't know that just one day later, that wedding would go up in smoke, and the name Isabella Green would be on everyone's lips in Charleston. And I, the one crossed off from family, would be the last one standing when everything fell apart. When I got home that night, my little house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. I sank into a chair, slipped off the heels that had made my feet ache, and looked around the room, the place that held the marks of a lifetime as a single mother. The worn rug underfoot, the sofa I bought that first Christmas after my husband left, the small framed photo on the shelf, Nathan at 6, grinning in a cowboy costume. I remember that day. It was the first time I realized I had to learn to be both parents. 30 years ago, on a fall afternoon, my husband David said he needed time for himself. I thought it was a temporary fight, but it turned out to be the last time he walked out the door. Nathan ran after him. "Where are you going? Are you coming home tonight?" He just patted our son's head and left. The door closed, and there I was, standing alone in an empty house with a 6-year-old and a stack of unpaid bills. What followed were months that turned into years of grind. I picked up night shifts at St. Francis Hospital, working in the ER, where disinfectant mixed with alarm beeps. I worked 12, sometimes 16 hours a day. Sometimes I had to brace myself against a wall when I came home so I wouldn't collapse. But every morning when Nathan woke up, I smiled and pretended I wasn't tired. I didn't want him to see me worn down. I wanted him to believe we were okay. We ate instant noodles so often that Nathan knew exactly which flavor was cheap but good. But every Halloween, I still found a way to buy him a new costume, one year a superhero, another year a doctor, another a detective. I didn't want him to feel less than other kids. Sometimes I skipped lunch to afford a mask, but seeing him run around the house laughing made everything worth it. Nathan grew up with love and without much money, but he never complained. He studied hard, was self-motivated, and had an especially kind heart. I remember coming home late from a Fraud shift when he was 8 and finding him asleep at the table, sketchbook open. He'd drawn 2 people, an adult in a white coat and a smaller child holding hands with a shaky line of words, "I will protect Mom, like Mom always protects me." I broke down, kissing his hair. That sentence, written with a child's unsteady hand, became my guiding light. Every time I was exhausted, I remembered that promise, and I got up, went back to work, kept going. As Nathan grew older, he made me prouder. He earned a scholarship to the University of South Carolina, then got into law school. I still remember the day he called, voice trembling, "Mom, I did it. You don't have to worry anymore." I burst into tears in the hospital hallway, not caring who saw. I knew the sleepless nights and every penny saved finally meant something. I cut expenses to the bone, sold my old car, scraped together enough for his first semester's tuition. Once, I tried to take back-to-back night shifts. For 2 weeks. The attending looked at me and said, "Eleanor, are you trying to kill yourself?" I just smiled. "No, I'm funding a dream." Then Nathan graduated, standing on stage in a black gown, the light catching his bright smile. I sat in the front row, heart ready to burst. In that moment, I thought everything was worth it. Every hardship, every slight for being a woman without a husband, all of it gave me the greatest gift, a son who succeeded, was decent, and loved his mother. After the ceremony, Nathan held my hand. "Mom, once I'm settled, I want you to rest. You've done too much." I smiled and patted his hand. "I just need to see you happy." And I believed it. I believed life would finally be peaceful. When Nathan introduced Isabella, I truly hoped for another child in the family. Isabella was so beautiful that every eye turned to her golden hair, soft voice, confident smile. I hoped she would love my son and be the partner he deserved. I even tidied the kitchen and made honey-glazed roast chicken, Nathan's favorite, just to welcome her the first time. But from the moment she stepped in, a chill ran down my spine. Her gaze skimmed over everything from the family photos to the porcelain tea set I've kept since I was young. She said, "Your home is so traditional. Maybe that's why Nathan values simplicity." I smiled and thanked her, but I knew it wasn't a compliment. That night, she talked on and on about work, trips to Europe, and her family's upscale apartment in Manhattan. I just listened and smiled. After she left, Nathan put an arm around me. "What do you think of her, Mom?" I answered gently, "She's smart and driven, but remember, don't let anyone make you forget where you came from." Nathan laughed. "I never will, Mom." I wanted to believe him. But the more time passed, the more I saw the change. When they had their engagement party, Isabella didn't ask me to help with anything, no cake, no decor, not even the guest list. She said, "You just need to show up and look nice." Light words, but they pierced like a small blade. I smiled again, burying the hurt with the calm of a mother used to enduring. I thought this wedding was the reward for the long road of raising my son. I wanted to believe the pain had ended, that I'd gained someone else to love. Instead, I saw measuring eyes and dismissive words. And then that night, the rehearsal party, Isabella's sentence carved into my heart like a wound that wouldn't heal. "After tomorrow, you won't be part of this family anymore." It echoed in my head all night, like church bells in an empty sanctuary. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the years I gave up everything for my child. I thought of the little boy who held my hand in the rain and promised to protect me. I thought of extra shifts, cold meals, calluses on my palms, and now all of it reduced to a single act of erasure. I wasn't angry at Nathan. I knew he didn't know. But I hurt with a pain no doctor could fix. It came from betrayal of trust, from being pushed out of my own life. All my life, I endured to give my son a home and a whole childhood. Now that he had everything, I thought I'd finally rest in gratitude and love. Instead, I was cast out of family on the eve of his happiness. I sat up, opened a drawer, and took out the little blue notebook where I'd recorded Nathan's milestones, first day of school, birthdays, graduations. I ran my fingers over each page like it was my own heart. "No," I whispered, "I'm still his mother, no matter what anyone says." Outside, the ocean breeze drifted in with salt and a hint of night chill. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. The pain was still there, but under it was something else, a kind of awakening. If the world wanted to erase me, I would show them what a woman called no longer family could do when pushed to the edge. After that party, I couldn't sleep. Every time I shut my eyes, Isabella's voice replayed, "You won't be part of this family anymore." It looped like static, sending a shiver down my back each time. When the sun rose, I washed my face, poured a cup of coffee, and told myself to stay calm. Nathan was getting married. I couldn't ruin his happiness over my wounded pride. I thought maybe she was tipsy, or testing my boundaries. But what came next told me some things are said with perfect sobriety. From the start, Isabella never hid her fixation on financial futures and social status. She talked about high-rise condos, investments, and the connections you need to get ahead. I once chalked it up to being young, but the more I listened, the colder I felt. When Nathan talked about his first job at a small local firm, she gave a soft laugh. "I think you should aim for one of the big firms in New York or Atlanta. Charleston doesn't offer much." Nathan smiled. "I like starting small. My mom taught me that anything worth having is built with your own hands." She raised an eyebrow, half joking. "Sure, but your mom doesn't live in today's world." It felt like a slap. She spoke in gentle, polished tones, like everything was well-meaning advice, but under the honey was quiet contempt. When Nathan told her he spent weekends visiting me, having dinner, and watching old movies, she frowned. "Babe, we could use that time to network, meet people who matter." "Movie nights with your mom." "That sounds a little outdated." I said nothing. I smiled when Nathan told me, but a vague dread grew inside me. She started taking Nathan to elegant parties and dinners with friends in marketing, law, and business. They were the kind who spoke in numbers and big plans. "Nathan wasn't that type," he used to say. "I just want to help people, not race." But slowly, I heard his tone shift. He talked about investments and career opportunities, and mentioned less about small cases helping the poor. Worse was how she deliberately cut me out of important moments. She never invited me to gatherings with friends, never told me about shared events. When I asked, Nathan chuckled, "She worries you'll be tired, Mom." "Those parties are loud." I nodded, not wanting to make him uncomfortable, but I knew that wasn't the truth. Once, for Nathan's birthday, she threw a dinner at the most expensive French restaurant in town. I found out from a neighbor, not from my own son. I still remember the tight pull in my chest seeing the photos online. Nathan in a new suit, arm around Isabella, friends glowing under the lights. And me, alone at home with the chocolate cake I baked like every year, still wrapped in foil. The next week, when Nathan dropped by, I didn't ask. I set the cake on the table and said, "I made a birthday cake. Take it home." He smiled, a bit guilty. "Thanks, Mom." Isabella wanted a surprise. "Party I didn't know how to invite you in time." I nodded, pretending to believe him. That smile was just a cover. Inside, my heart was cracking. Another time, at a small get-together at her friend's place, I was invited, as a formality. While I stood in a corner holding a glass of water, I heard a young woman ask quietly, "So your future mother-in-law used to be a nurse?" Isabella laughed, light as glass chimes and sharp as a blade. "Yeah, she used to be. Now she's retired. At least she can take care of herself, doesn't need my help." People laughed along, and I stood still. To others, that might sound harmless. I heard every layer. At least she can take care of herself, meaning that's as far as she goes. Not our level. Not fit for the world she and her friends were building. I left early, claiming I was tired. In the car, I sat a long time, watching the glittering lights reflect on the windshield. I didn't cry. I just felt a suffocating emptiness. 15 years in nursing, I'd held strangers' hands in their final minutes, but I had never felt as small as I did hearing that line. I kept my polite distance. I never badmouthed Isabella to Nathan. I feared hurting him, feared becoming the reason he'd be torn between us. But inside, I began to log everything: looks, fake smiles, sweet words laced with venom. I wrote them in my phone, in a little notes app no one knew about. Another time, at their new apartment, Isabella was on a call. I heard her say, "He's got huge potential, he just needs the right direction. I don't plan to stay in Charleston forever, the market here is too small." A chill ran through me. I thought of Nathan, the boy who dreamed of staying in this city and opening a small practice to help people. Now he was being directed, bit by bit, by someone who saw only potential to shape. More and more, I realized Isabella didn't want a family, she wanted a deal. Nathan was her long-term project, and I was the obstacle. She didn't want a mother-in-law or a witness to her husband's simple past. She wanted a clean story. Two young, successful people stepping into a perfect marriage. I started noticing details I'd once ignored. When I told Nathan about the old necklace I wore at my own wedding, Isabella cut in. "Oh, that vintage look is trending again. I know a shop in New York with pieces just like that, probably pretty cheap." When I gifted them a hand-knit blanket, she smiled and said, "It's lovely, but a bit too heavy. It would probably suit your place better." Every word and gesture sketched a clearer picture. I was being erased quietly, without drama like rubbing out an extra pencil line on a pristine canvas. But I'm not easy to erase. I've lived on memory, and detail nursing taught me that. I remember patients' faces, tiny signs before pain hits, promises that never got kept. And now I use that skill to record the moment Isabella built her perfect world with no place for me. Every night, I opened my phone and typed a few lines. March 22nd, she talked about moving to New York. March 29th, she left me off the guest list. April 4th, told a friend, "I used to be a nurse," like it was a stain. I didn't know exactly why I was writing. Maybe to steady myself, or to prove I wasn't imagining it, that what I saw was real, not pride talking. The more I wrote, the more I understood her, a person who always knew the right thing to say, the right time to smile, and how to hide ambition under charm. Each time she brushed aside a memory between me and my son, my heart cinched tighter, and at the same time, a small fire grew inside me. Not anger, but clarity. I'd stood on the edge of exhaustion and survived. I could stand there again. And no matter how many perfect images she built, I knew no picture holds if the background is erased. I, the one called excess, am that background. And soon, she'll learn. You can't build a future by burying the past. That morning, the day I should have been sitting in the front row at my son's wedding, the Charleston sky was unusually clear. The first sunlight slipped through the curtains and fell across the dining table where the wedding invitation still lay, half open. I woke early out of habit, boiled water for a cup of black tea, and watched the steam blur over the wooden tabletop. In the corner, the teal dress I'd hung up weeks ago was still crisp and perfect, the color Nathan once said, "Looks beautiful on you, like sunrise." I stared at it for a long time. That color no longer felt like sunrise. It looked like a lonely streak of light in a room crowded with memories. I sat down, gripping my cup to steady myself. The phone started ringing. Then, one call, 2, 3. Friends, old coworkers, distant relatives. Everyone had the same tone, hurried, surprised, even scolding. "Eleanor, where are you? The wedding car is almost there. My God, why aren't you answering? Your son is the groom." They must be worried sick. I stayed silent and listened. When the 5th call came, I turned the ringer off and flipped the invitation over. Nathan and Isabella was embossed on cream paper, with a small line beneath, "With love and gratitude to our families." I gave a thin smile. With gratitude to our families. After last night when she whispered that I was no longer part of the family, those words had turned into bitter irony. I took a sip of tea and looked at the clock. 7:45 a.m. If things had gone as planned, I'd be getting my makeup done now, choosing shoes, calling a cab to Street Matthews. I had pictured this day so many times, Nathan glancing back, seeing me in the front row, smiling with pride, eyes wet. But now there was only the ticking clock and sunlight crawling up the hem of the dress. I told myself quietly, no. One can force me to sit through my own erasure. I didn't cry. I figured the tears had run out last night. Around 9 a.m., the knocking came hard and fast. It was my sister, Margaret. She wore a pale blue dress, the bridesmaid's color. Her hair was neatly curled, her heels still dusty from the road. When I opened the door, she practically rushed in. "Eleanor, what are you doing? The whole church is asking where you are." "Calmly," I said. "I'm not going." Margaret stared, stunned. "Not going? What are you saying? Today is Nathan's wedding." "Your son!" I lifted my head, my voice rough but steady. "She told me last night. After today, I'm no longer part of the family. So I'm honoring her words." Margaret froze, staring at me. After a few seconds, she sank into a chair with a long sigh, hand to her forehead. "God, Eleanor, do you know what people will think? They'll call you bitter. They'll say you ruined your son's big day." I let out a laugh, with no joy in it. "I've already been labeled excess. What else is there to fear?" She looked around the room and her eyes landed on the teal dress hanging neatly. She stepped over and brushed the fabric with her fingers. "It's beautiful. Wear it today at least, for Nathan." I shook my head. "No, it won't be Nathan's day if I show up. It'll be her day, and she's made it clear she doesn't want me there." My voice was gentle, but I knew Margaret heard it break at the end. She went quiet for a moment, then pleaded again, "But at least go just to be seen. Otherwise people will start rumors." I sat down, poured more tea, and slid the cup toward her. "Margaret, I don't live for rumors anymore. I've spent a lifetime living for other people. Today, I'm choosing silence." The air went still. Outside the window, traffic grew busier, guests, probably, heading to the church. I could even hear faint bells in the distance, like smoke, signaling the ceremony was near. Margaret looked at me, eyes glossy. "Eleanor, I don't know what to say." I squeezed her hand. "I know you love me. But this is the only choice that lets me keep a little self-respect." At 9:30 a.m., Margaret left after saying in a shaky voice, "At least turn your phone on. If Nathan calls, don't make him think you gave up on him." I nodded and walked her to the door. When it closed, the house fell quiet again. I went back to the table, looked at the dress once more, then folded it and tucked it carefully into the closet. I poured more hot water and drank slowly. Each distant peal from the church bells tightened my chest, but I stayed put, holding steady. I pictured Nathan, his smile in a black suit, the bright look in his eyes when he once said, "Mom, I found the person I want to spend my life with." I only hoped today he'd truly be happy, even if that happiness had no room for me. At 10 a.m., the phone started ringing nonstop. I didn't pick up. A voicemail came through, his voice trembling. "Mom, I'm on my way to the church. Where are you? I know you're not tired. Please don't hide." "It's my day. You can't be missing." Nathan's voice shook with urgency. I pressed the phone to my chest, closed my eyes, and cried before I could stop myself. I wanted to run out the door, go to him, hold him the way I did when he was little, but then I remembered Isabella's words and that cold stare. Softly, to myself, I said, "No, Eleanor, not today. Your son needs to see the truth, even if it hurts." Around 10:30 a.m., a car pulled up. Margaret rushed back in, hair mussed, dress wrinkled, out of breath. "I can't stand it, Eleanor. The whole church is buzzing. Everyone's asking where you are. Nathan is looking for you everywhere. You have to go." I looked at her and shook my head. "No, I've decided. I'm not going. If she wants a perfect wedding without me, let her have it." Margaret gripped my hands, tears spilling. "Eleanor, you'll regret this." I smiled, and tears slid down my face, too. "Maybe, but if I regret anything, it'll be in dignity, not in bowing my head." At 11 a.m., the church bells began to ring. I watched the clock, my stomach twisting. Each chime fell like a blade. I pictured everyone standing, the choir starting to sing, Nathan taking his place, then Isabella entering in white, lights reflecting off her face. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine my son's smile. I wanted to believe that at the very least, he kept in his heart the image of a mother standing outside the church doors, praying for his peace. Time crawled. Near noon, sunlight poured through the window, streaking the floor with bright bands. I made more tea and sat in the old wooden chair. The second hand ticked on until the phone rang again. It was Margaret. Her voice shook like she'd seen something impossible. "Eleanor, are you sitting down?" I squinted, my heart pounding. "What happened? The wedding?" "The wedding's off. Charleston was beautiful that morning, but the midday message was ice cold." "Who do you think is most at fault at this turning point, Isabella, or Eleanor's forced silence? Share your thoughts, I'll read every comment." I jumped up. The teacup hit the floor and shattered, steam curling into the heavy air. "What do you mean? Cancelled? Why?" Margaret took a long breath. "I don't have it all yet, but something awful happened. The church is in chaos. People are talking everywhere." I went blank for a few seconds, then fell back into the chair. I couldn't name what I felt: fear, confusion, or a dark premonition rolling in. I only heard Margaret again, small and urgent. "Eleanor, brace yourself. This is going to shake the whole city." I gripped the phone, my palms ice cold. I didn't ask for details. I just lifted my eyes to the teal dress, still hanging in the one closet, silent, like a witness to a bitter decision. After she hung up, I sat still for a long time. Two sentences clashed in my head, cruelly opposed. My son just lost the woman he loved, and she finally got what she deserved. I didn't know what had truly happened, but deep down, I knew a storm had begun. And this time, I wouldn't be the one to bear the consequences. The phone was still in my hand when Margaret's voice broke again on the other end. I could hear the noise behind her, shouting, footsteps, and somewhere, messy sobs. Then through it all, my sister's voice came, shaking so much I had to hold my breath to catch it. "Eleanor." Nathan found out she was cheating. Everything around me went eerily quiet. The wall clock still ticked, but I barely heard it. I just stood there, staring at nothing, feeling hollowed out. I couldn't believe what I'd heard. Margaret spoke fast, breathless. "The best man, Mark. Nathan's close friend from college showed him photos. Isabella, with her boss. Taken 2 weeks before the wedding. It's clear, Eleanor, there's no way to deny it." I clenched the phone until my fingertips went white. I saw Isabella in a white gown, smiling under bright lights, saying sweet things. At the same time, I saw Nathan, my son, with the most trusting, earnest eyes, looking at that woman, unaware he was just a piece on her board. I steadied my voice. "Is he okay, Margaret? Did Nathan do anything impulsive?" "No. But he's shattered. Eleanor, I've never seen him like this." The whole church went dead silent when Mark handed him the phone. Margaret kept going, each word cutting into me. Around 10:30 a.m., Nathan was in the prep room with his friends. Everyone was joking with the groom. Then Mark walked in pale, phone in his hand. "Nathan, you need to see this," he said, voice tight. On the screen were phone photos. Isabella in a red dress, arm in arm with her boss Anne, older, tall man with a gold watch. They were in a bar under dim lights, their mouths almost touching. In the last shot, Isabella leaned on his shoulder, smiling, eyes shining like that was where she truly belonged. At first, Nathan didn't believe it. He thought they were old photos, a nasty prank. But Mark shook his head. "A neighbor of hers sent these, taken 2 weeks ago. I wasn't going to show you, but I couldn't let you marry her without knowing." Margaret said. Nathan went silent for almost a minute, then exhaled, tossed his handkerchief onto the table, and walked straight to the bridal room without waiting for anyone. Inside, Isabella was having her lipstick touched up. When Nathan opened the door, the room froze. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "You can't be in here, you'll see the dress," she said, half teasing. Nathan said nothing, just held out the phone. "Explain," he said, voice hoarse. She glanced at the screen and froze for 2 seconds. Then, like she'd rehearsed, she gave a small laugh. "Oh please, who sent you this? Obviously old photos. He's just my boss, you know that." Nathan didn't move. "They were taken 2 weeks ago. You're lying." His voice jumped, making the makeup artist drop a brush. Isabella stepped closer, trying to grab his hand. "Someone's poisoning you. It's your mother, isn't it? She never accepted me. She wants to ruin this. I know it, she's never liked me." Nathan cut her off. Thunder in his voice. "That's enough. My mother didn't ruin anything." "You did." The room went silent. After a few beats, Isabella still tried to salvage it. "Nathan, you misunderstood. She hates me, But Nathan had already walked out. Margaret said that when he stepped back into the hall, his face was white, his eyes red. Rumors spread like wildfire. Within minutes, the pews buzzed. People whispered, then went silent as Nathan walked to the altar, the priest still confused. The priest looked up, flustered. "Son, there are 10 minutes before the ceremony." Nathan raised a hand. "No need, Father." His voice carried through the quiet. Then he turned to the crowd and spoke clearly, word by word. "I'm sorry. There won't be a wedding today." A wave of murmurs rolled through the church. I could picture it: shocked faces, paper fans stilled, all eyes on the groom. Isabella walked in right after, her white dress glittering. She saw Nathan at the front, fists clenched, face blank. "Nathan, what are you saying?" "You know exactly what," Nathan said, holding up the phone. "And you know why." Gasps rippled through the pews. Isabella looked around, pale, then forced a smile. "It must be a joke." "Edited photos. Your mother," Nathan roared. "Don't talk about my mother." It hit like a hammer on the floor. Someone said a woman in the back row started crying. Some guests lowered their eyes, avoiding the groom's gaze. Margaret said in that moment Nathan became someone else hurt, but strong. He stared at Isabella, voice shaking but firm. "You told my mother she wasn't family. You were wrong. You never understood what family is." The air in the church thickened. You could hear the whisper of Tool as Isabella stepped back, tears spilling. "You'll regret this," she screamed. "You're destroying your life." Nathan answered once, cold, "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just done lying to myself." Then he turned, walked straight down the aisle, past the guests, past Isabella's parents frozen in the front row. A few people tried to stop him, but it was useless. The doors opened, noon light flooded in so bright people shielded their eyes. Nathan stepped outside without looking back. Behind him, Isabella collapsed, her dress smudged, lipstick streaked. Whispers spread like a sudden storm. She cheated. Before the wedding. God, that poor groom. By the time Margaret got to this part, I was still standing by the window. A light breeze moved the curtain. I realized I'd been crying without noticing. "The whole church is chaos," Margaret whispered. "People can't believe it." Some guests left in silence. The priest could only pray. Isabella's parents are arguing with the press at the gate. "Eleanor, this is going to be all over the city." I sank into a chair, tears pooling in my hands. I didn't know if they were tears of pain or relief. Maybe both. My son, the boy I feared would be used and hurt, finally saw the truth. But the price was brutal. I looked at Nathan's graduation photo, the silver frame catching dull light. I brushed a finger over his face in the picture and whispered, "Son, I prayed you'd see her for who she is. I just never thought it would happen like this." The phone rang again. A neighbor, then an old friend from the hospital, then people I barely remembered. Everyone wanted to tell me about the earth-shattering scene at Street Matthews this morning. Everyone asked if I knew beforehand. I said only one thing. I only knew the truth always finds its way out. That afternoon I sat by the window, listening to wind move through the magnolia trees out front. Local news blurbs started mentioning a last-minute canceled wedding rattling Charleston's upper set. I listened, hollow. Amid the chaos, a strange calm rose in me, not gloating, but relief that my son was freed before a marriage chained him for life. I closed my eyes and whispered a thank you. Thank you for letting him see, before it was too late. Outside, dusk settled. The last light of day fell on the teal dress in the closet, still perfect, never worn. I walked over, touched the fabric, and murmured, "Today, my son didn't marry her, but he found himself again, and I knew the storm had only just begun." That afternoon, just as the sun dipped behind the magnolia trees off my porch, my phone wouldn't stop, vibrating. At first, I thought a family member was calling to ask about Nathan. But then the screen filled with one notification after another. Charleston Daily Post, City Herald, and social media pages flooded with the same headline. Mother of the groom ruins wedding. Dream ceremony falls apart at the last minute. I read the line over and over, like my eyes were betraying my mind. Beneath it was a photo of Isabella in her white wedding dress, mascara smeared, both hands covering her face. The caption was shaky, weak, but calculated. Some people don't know when to let go. In the picture, she looked like the most pitiful victim in the world, the woman harmed by a selfish mother-in-law. I went still, not because I felt insulted, but because of how perfectly they built that story. Comments popped up like knives, one after another. Typical jealous mother-in-law competing with the young bride. Poor bride stuck with a controlling mom. Heard the mom. Refused to attend and spread rumors to ruin the wedding. I sat in the dark, the phone screen bright like a flashlight on an open wound. In just a few hours, I, the woman who raised her son with everything she had had, become a jealous old hag to thousands of strangers. As evening fell, neighbors started appearing at my gate. Some knocked to pry, others just stared and walked away. An old friend from the hospital texted, "Eleanor, did you really tell your daughter-in-law she's not family?" I answered with 2 words, "Absolutely not." But I knew the more you explain, the more people believe the opposite. The next morning, I went to the market like usual. The produce lady who'd once congratulated me for getting such a beautiful daughter-in-law looked at me, stayed quiet, then turned away. I forced a smile and wrapped my greens. Shame rose in me like a wave. When I got home, Nathan was already sitting on the steps. His face was drawn, dark circles under, his eyes from no sleep. He stood when he saw me, voice tired. "Mom, you have to promise me something." I set my bags down and asked gently, "What is it, son?" "Don't respond. Don't post anything, don't talk to the press. They just want more to feed on. If you stay quiet, they'll get bored and move on." I looked at my son, the same son who had stood up for me in church, now bracing himself to carry the weight. I felt tender toward him, and it hurt. "You believe they'll forget?" I asked. Nathan scratched his head, voice thinning. "All it takes is time, Mom. If you speak up, they'll say you're trying to justify yourself. It'll be worse." I didn't answer right away. My own words from years ago echoed in my head. Silence can be protection sometimes. But now I understood this silence wasn't protection. It was erasure. 2 days later, as I was making my morning tea, a knock came at the door. The mailman stood outside holding a thick, sealed, yellow envelope. I signed, thinking it was bank paperwork. But when I opened it, I saw cold, italicized words. "Notice of lawsuit for causing emotional distress and interfering with marriage." I reread every line. My name, Eleanor Shaw, sat in the defendant box. Above it were the names of Isabella Green and her parents. I thought I must be dreaming. My hands shook. I sat down and read again. "Willful infliction of emotional pressure and defamation, resulting in irreparable harm to the party." I let out a flat laugh. Harm? Who exactly was harmed here? That afternoon, I took the envelope to the office of Linda Cole, my friend, a retired attorney who still advises a small law firm in downtown Charleston. Linda is a woman in her 60s, petite, cropped silver hair, eyes sharp as a blade. When I set the papers on her desk, she looked at me and frowned. "You look like you just swallowed a storm." I told her everything from the night Isabella pushed me out of the rehearsal dinner, to the collapsed wedding, to the accusations exploding online. Linda flipped through the complaint and gave a short, dry laugh. "Eleanor, this isn't a real lawsuit. It's a scare tactic." I looked up, not believing it. "What?" "Look at this line," she said, pointing to interference with contractual relations. "They're claiming you wrecked a marriage contract. But the law doesn't treat a wedding like a commercial contract. There's no legal basis for this. They just want to frighten you into staying quiet." I exhaled, but the lump of anger stayed. Why would they do this? They've smeared me everywhere, and now they're sending legal threats? Linda leaned back, took off her glasses, and looked straight at me. "Because, Eleanor, they lost money. That stopped me cold." "What do you mean? You really didn't know?" Linda's voice dropped. "Isabella's family is broke. Her father tanked 3 real estate projects. They needed this marriage to stabilize their cash flow. Nathan, with a law degree and a bright future, was their life raft. That wedding was a debt rescue plan, not love." I sat quiet, heart pounding. The pieces clicked her talk about financial future, the way Isabella sized everything up, her control over every wedding detail. It wasn't care, it was calculus. Linda went on, firm. "They thought they could control Nathan through marriage, and you, the single mother, were the obstacle. When Nathan discovered the truth, they lost everything. So, now they need a scapegoat." I gave a sad smile as tears slipped out without me noticing. And that scapegoat, of course, is me. Linda stood and poured me a glass of water. Right. In every failure, people need a villain. And no role is more convenient than a quiet mother-in-law. I gripped the glass, my voice tight. Linda, I'm not afraid of a lawsuit. I'm afraid people will believe I destroyed my fine son's happiness. She smiled softly and squeezed my hand. Eleanor, you raised your son for nearly 30 years with these hands. No one gets to redefine that. But if you want your name back, you fight with facts, not tears. I looked at her. The afternoon light, glinting off her lenses, made her face seem both tough and warm. I knew she was right. They'd used my silence to strengthen their lie. If I stayed quiet, they would win. That evening when I got home, I opened my phone and watched the posts still spreading. A few close friends advised, just endure it, that time will tell. But I knew time only reveals truth for those willing to speak it. I opened a drawer and pulled out the small notebook where I'd recorded everything since meeting Isabella. The cutting remarks, the details she dropped at parties, even a text thread I'd accidentally seen on Nathan's phone where she asked him to transfer money to my dad, just for now. I ran a hand over the cover and said to myself, fine. If they want a war over reputation, I'll fight, but with the truth. Outside, night wind moved through the window frame, leaves scratching softly. I knew this would be a long fight. But after years of enduring, I was no longer the mother who only stayed silent. And for the first time since the wedding fell apart, I felt strangely calm. Because now I had the one thing they couldn't deny: the truth. 2 days after our meeting, Linda called me near noon. Her voice was rough and urgent, like she'd been arguing or up all night. Eleanor, I just found what you need to see, she said. What is it? Evidence. A lot of what they don't want you to see. That afternoon I went to her small office in downtown Charleston. The room was on the second floor of an old building, yellowed walls, the smell of coffee mixed with old paper. Linda sat behind her desk, a stack of files, and an open laptop in front of her. When I walked in, she looked up, more serious than ever. Sit, she said slowly. I've reviewed Isabella's father's company, Green Capital Group. On the surface, they're operating. In reality, they're on the brink of bankruptcy. I frowned. Bankruptcy? Yes. They owe the bank more than $2 million and are being sued for investment fraud. 2 real estate projects in Florida and Savannah failed. Her father, Richard Green, used personal loans to keep it afloat, but next month they'll start repossessing assets. I sat still. The picture sharpened. I remembered Isabella saying, Nathan has a stable future. He'll be the financial backbone for both of us. Now I understood backbone wasn't for her alone. It was for the whole family. Linda flipped to another packet, printed emails and accounting summaries. I found something else, she said, handing me a set. It was a draft prenuptial agreement. Look here. Linda tapped a highlighted section. Clause 12. In the first 5 years of marriage, 70% of Nathan's net income goes into a joint account in the names of Nathan Shaw and Isabella Green. What's more, that account grants access to Richard Green, her father. My eyes widened. Good Lord, Linda nodded. If they married, Richard would have legal control over that money. Once Nathan signed, he'd be tied up completely. They didn't just want salary. They wanted Nathan's future. My hands shook as I turned the pages, dry legal language like steel. Each line felt like a blade. I remembered the first night I met Isabella, her smile when she spoke about financial stability, her line about marriage as a partnership between 2 people with vision. Back then I sensed something off, but I told myself, maybe she just wanted a better life. Now I understood it wasn't better. It was possession. My voice caught. Linda, are you sure? Is all of this real? She looked at me, without flinching. I never say what I haven't verified. These filings are from public financial court records. As for the prenup, a colleague who once consulted for the Greens sent it. They didn't rush to destroy it because they assumed the wedding was a lock. I leaned back, heart thudding. The room tilted, the air suddenly heavy. So, I said slowly, it was a transaction. She never loved my son. Linda nodded. That's right. Isabella was a piece on the board. They wanted to save the company and their name. Nathan was perfect, young lawyer, talented, not from their social tier, easier to control. I gave a thin smile as tears fell onto my hand. They really planned it all out like that? Linda sighed. In the world of money, people will sell even love. And they did. I went quiet for a long time. I saw Nathan, the same boy who once said, "Mom, I just want someone genuine." What he got was a financial plan wearing love's mask. I was furious, and I was heartsick. Linda softened her voice. I know it's a lot, but Eleanor, this is your chance. You can clear your name, and more importantly, expose the truth. I looked at her. In the warm afternoon light, the deep lines on Linda's face showed a woman who'd seen too much injustice. I don't just want to be cleared, I said, low but firm. I want them held accountable for trying to wreck my son's life. She nodded and slid a small USB drive toward me. This has copies of the prenup, emails, and Green Capital's financials. Keep it safe. Tell no one but me. I picked it up. It felt heavy, like a stone. What will you do with it? I asked. I'll send a copy to a financial investigative journalist, she said. He's exposed big scandals in Atlanta. But be ready once this is out. There's no going back. I nodded. I don't want to go back, Linda. I've spent my life enduring. Not anymore. She smiled and put a hand on my shoulder. Good. That's the strong mother I know. That night I went home. A light rain fell, tapping the eaves like a racing heartbeat. I switched on the light, opened the cabinet, and took out my notebook, the one I'd started the night Isabella pushed me out of the party. I turned the pages and added what Linda gave me. The printed agreement, screenshots of emails, bank slips. I reread the messy line I wrote weeks ago. I won't let them erase me from my son's life. Then I added a new line beneath it, neat and final. I won't let them take my son's future. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window and watched rain roll down the glass, feeling something strange, not fear, but clarity. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what to do. I wouldn't just clear my name. I would expose everything with the light of truth. And I swore, no matter their money or influence, I, the mother they called not family anymore, would be the one to make them pay. 3 days after I learned the full truth about the Green family, an invitation arrived at my house. Not ordinary stationery, a fancy envelope embossed with the Charleston Grand Plaza Hotel logo. Inside was an invitation to a reconciliation dinner, signed by Richard Green, with a smooth line in blue ink. Let's talk like adults and put an end to all misunderstandings. I read it again and gave a cold smile. Misunderstandings? I thought. When someone tries to steal your child's future, that's not a misunderstanding, it's a scheme. That afternoon, Nathan stopped by. The exhaustion showed on his face. He held the letter and shook his head. Mom, don't go. I know them. That dinner isn't reconciliation, it's a setup. They want you to apologize publicly to rescue their reputation. I put a hand on his shoulder. Did you forget, Nathan? I'm not the frightened woman I used to be. He stayed quiet, worry in his eyes. If they pull something, you'll be alone against all of them? I smiled, calm. No, son, I'm not going to fight them. I'm going to end this with the truth. That evening, I opened the closet and took out the teal dress that had hung there for days. The dress I was supposed to wear to my son's wedding, the day my joy was taken. I smoothed the fabric, put it on, and looked in the mirror. In the dim light, the face that stared back wasn't a frail mother. It was a woman who had stood up from wreckage. I slid the file Linda prepared into my bag and drove to the hotel. Charleston was humid and close that night, streetlights hazed like smoke. The Grand Plaza glowed, crowded with people. I took a breath and went through the revolving door, my heartbeat slowing as if I were stepping onto a stage where I already knew every line. The private dining room was on the 10th floor. When the host opened the door, they were already there. Richard Green at the head, heavyset, face flushed with liquor, his wife, Marion with a thin smile and cold eyes, and Isabella, blonde hair neatly twisted up, bright red lips, a fitted black dress. She looked at me, lips curling. "Oh, you really came. I thought you'd hide like before." I pulled out a chair and sat across from them, setting my bag down, voice even. "I'm not hiding from anything, Isabella. But tonight you're the ones who should be explaining." She laughed high and sharp. "Explaining what? I thought you came to apologize. My father already said we can settle this peacefully if you accept your share of responsibility." I tilted my head. "Responsibility for what?" Richard cut in, voice low and authoritative. "You know, Mrs. Shaw, your silence led the public to the wrong conclusion. We just want a statement confirming you didn't intentionally sabotage the wedding. Do that, and this ends." I smiled and slowly pulled a thick file from my bag, laying it on the table. "Yes, I have a statement, but not the kind you're expecting, Mr. Green." Isabella narrowed her eyes, lips twitching. "What now? Going to wave old photos around? Or retell how I insulted you? No one's gonna buy it." I opened the file and took out the first page, the prenup Linda gave me. Clear print, faint ink where signatures would go. I placed it in front of them and spoke clean and steady. Clause 12. In the first 5 years of marriage, 70% of Nathan Shaw's net income will be transferred into a joint account owned by Nathan Shaw and Isabella Green. This account grants access to Richard Green. I paused and looked around the table. For a few seconds, no one said a word. The air got so thick I could hear the hum of the vent overhead. Marion set down her glass, her hand trembling. Richard leaned back, his face turning from red to chalk. Isabella tried to hold a smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched. I went on, slow and sharp. "Mr. Green, I don't know if, in your world, marriage is a tool to rescue a company. In mine, marriage is love, not a business contract. You weren't marrying into my family. You were marrying a bank." Richard slammed his hand on the table. The glass rattled, red liquid sloshing like blood. "You dare accuse me?" I met his eyes, calmer than ever. "Not accusing. Reading aloud what you wrote." Isabella shot to her feet, voice shrill. "Who do you think will believe this? You got those papers illegally. They're worthless in court." I gave a small smile. "How about moral weight, Isabella? Or is that a concept you've never heard of?" Her face flushed. She turned to Richard. "Dad, don't let her smear us in front of the press." Richard growled. "The press? You'd take this public, Mrs. Shaw?" I stood up, slowly gathered the documents, and lowered my voice. "Did you just ask if I dare?" I looked straight at Isabella, my eyes cold as steel. "Watch me." In that moment, the room almost exploded in silence. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe. Marion jumped to her feet, trying to calm things down. "Come on now, let's not make this any bigger. Eleanor, you misunderstood." I cut her off. "Do you know what I misunderstood? I misunderstood that my son was truly loved. The truth is, none of you have ever loved anyone but yourselves." I turned to Nathan. He had appeared at the doorway. I didn't know when he arrived. Maybe Linda had warned him. He stood still, eyes wide as he listened to me read the agreement. When our eyes met, what I saw in his wasn't fear, it was trust. Richard tried to stand, his voice cracking. "Nathan, don't believe her. This is fabricated, a tactic to—" But Nathan interrupted, his voice ringing out strong enough to silence everyone. "I've believed the wrong people long enough." He stepped closer and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, you don't need to say anything else. I've seen enough." Then, he turned to Isabella, who was still trembling, forcing a smile. "You said you loved me, but it turns out you only loved my bank account. You and your family turned marriage into a product for sale. But believe me, you will never buy back the dignity you lost." Isabella went pale, her voice choking. "You'll pay for defaming me." Nathan answered coolly, "No, Isabella, you'll pay for treating love like merchandise." I gently squeezed my son's hand and whispered, "Now you understand, don't you?" He nodded, gratitude in his eyes. No one in the Green family said another word. As Nathan and I turned to leave, I heard Marion collapse into a chair, Richard curse under his breath, and Isabella sob not out of remorse, but because she'd lost. Walking out of the hotel lobby, the night wind off the Ashley River blew hard, carrying damp air and a salty tang. I lifted my face to the sky, where clouds drifted slowly past the lights. For the first time in months, I felt truly relieved. Nathan walked beside me in silence. After a moment, he said softly, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't see what you saw." I smiled and wrapped my arms around him. "It's all right, Nathan. What matters is you see it now." We walked through Charleston's night, golden streetlights stretching across the misty pavement. Inside me, there was no resentment left, only a strange, quiet peace. Because I knew, from that moment on, they had lost the one thing money can't buy back: the truth. 2 days after the confrontation at the hotel, Linda came to my house. She carried an old leather bag with the documents I'd seen, along with a few newspapers and a small USB drive. There was something in her eyes, both cool and bright. "Eleanor," she said, "it's time." I set my teacup down gently. "Are you sure, Linda? Once the truth is out, they won't leave us alone." She gave a dry laugh. "You think they're leaving you alone now? You've been turned into a wicked old hag online for weeks. It's time they tasted what they've been dishing out." I stayed quiet for a moment. From the window, Charleston's morning light fell across the little garden where yellow chrysanthemums were blooming. They reminded me of what Nathan used to say as a child, "Mom, the light always finds a way." Maybe this was the moment the light found me. Linda opened her laptop and started a video call. A face appeared, a man in his 40s, slightly messy hair, glasses, a steady voice. "Eleanor, I'm Travis Dalton, an investigative reporter with the Carolina Ledger. Linda's told me part of your story." I nodded, hands clasped lightly. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want the truth to be known," Travis replied. "And that's exactly why I'm here. But I need you to be ready. When this runs, it won't just be news, it'll be a storm." I smiled faintly and said slowly, "Sometimes a storm is the only thing that can clear the pavides sky." 3 days later, Linda and I met Travis at a small cafe near the harbor. He had verified everything: the prenuptial agreement, bank statements, internal emails, and the financial records of Green Capital Group. His voice dropped. "Eleanor, this isn't just marital fraud. This is a sophisticated financial scheme. They used marriage as a tool to wash away debt." I felt my heart sink. "And now they've lost everything, yet I'm the one seen as the saboteur." Travis looked at me, serious. "It won't be long before people know who the real saboteur is." A week later, on a Monday morning, while I was watering the front yard, the phone started ringing non-stop. The sound echoed through the house. I picked up and heard my sister Margaret, breathless. "Eleanor, have you seen the news? It's out. All of Charleston is blowing up. I ran inside and turned on the TV. On the screen, the Carolina Ledger's logo appeared with a bold headline filling the whole display. Green family accused of financial fraud, marriage plan designed to seize assets. I froze for a few seconds. Then the footage shifted to a news package. Green Capital's office sealed, police on site, and enlarged shots of the contracts, the very ones I had held in my hands. The anchor's voice came through. The Carolina Ledger's exclusive investigation shows that Green Capital covertly planned a marriage between their daughter, Isabella Green, and young attorney Nathan Shaw, with a clause transferring 70% of the groom's income to an account controlled by the Green family. Sources confirm the groom's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Shaw, was defamed and targeted after she uncovered the scheme. I placed a hand over my chest, feeling my heart pound. I could hardly believe I was witnessing it. Linda texted, "It's spreading, Ellie. Everyone knows the truth." Social media, once full of insults, shifted. I watched new comments roll in every second. I thought she was cruel. Turns out she was the only clear-headed one. No one should go through that at her age. Deeply admire Eleanor Shaw's strength. The bride was just a financial tool. Horrifying. The feeling was strange. Not joy exactly, but a kind of release. As if the heavy fog that had smothered me for months finally lifted, leaving air that was fresh and painfully honest. The story spread like fire in the wind. 3 days later, the Charleston Tribune, the Daily Sun, and even national TV ran it. Marriage scandal: businessman Richard Green under investigation for financial fraud. Isabella disappeared from social media within hours. Her accounts were wiped clean, wedding photos, posts about being a target of jealousy all gone. A mutual acquaintance messaged me. She left Charleston. No one knows where. As for Richard Green, the man who once sat at the head of the table with a glass of red wine and a smug smile, he now appeared on the proceeded from Kant News with a gray face, escorted out of his office by police. Marion hid behind a car door to avoid cameras. I stood in my living room and watched it all on the screen. In that moment, I felt no gloating. Only a quiet sadness. Some victories don't make you happy. They just let you breathe because justice still exists. That evening, Nathan came by. He looked different, less tense, less weighed down. He put a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "I read everything, Mom." The article made it clear. They can't deny it anymore. I looked at him, tears rolling before I could stop them. "Nathan, I just want you to be happy. That's all." He squeezed my hand, voice tight. "I'm proud of you. You didn't stay silent. You did what your son didn't have the courage to do." I smiled through tears. "No, son. I just did what a mother is supposed to do, protect her child." We sat together for a long time. Outside, a light rain fell. The steady tapping on the eaves sounded like it was washing away the old accusations. I brewed 2 cups of tea, poured them, and the scent of bergamot filled the room, the smell of those peaceful evenings we used to have. Nathan told me that since the article ran, his law office had received countless messages of support and coworkers had rallied around him. "People say I escaped a financial trap, but for me," he paused, voice dropping, "the most important thing is I got my mom back." I chuckled softly. "I never went anywhere, Nathan." That night, after he left for home, I opened the window and looked out. The city glowed, lights like stars dropped to the ground. I remembered Isabella's words at that party. "After tomorrow, you won't be part of this family anymore." That sentence once stabbed through my heart. But now, standing in this generous light, I realized the one cut out of the family wasn't me, it was her. Because once love becomes a contract and marriage becomes a tool, there is no— I smiled faintly and whispered a small prayer. The truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. And that Charleston night, With the rain falling softly, I felt I'd gotten back the most precious thing, and peace. 2 months after that article, Charleston seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm, or maybe it only looked that way. Beneath the calm, I knew something had changed forever. In me, in Nathan, and in how this city saw me. In those first days, I still woke very early, as if my body wasn't used to not being on guard. I brewed tea, walked around my small garden, and listened to birds singing on the roof. The quiet felt both new and unfamiliar. Some mornings, I caught myself staring into the mirror, wondering, have I really made it through? Nathan kept busy again. After leaving his old firm, a friend got him a job at a smaller practice on the north side of town. There, my son didn't have to dress to impress or endure fancy parties and the pressure of reputation. He went back to who he really was, a man who loves justice and fairness and knows what's worth defending. One morning he stopped by with a bag of still warm pastries. "Mom, I start the new job today." I smiled. "The small firm up north?" He nodded, a calm in his eyes I hadn't seen since the day the wedding was called off. "I don't need much, Mom. I just want to do what I believe is right." I looked at him, pride swelling in my chest. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find ourselves. And Nathan was doing exactly that. As for me, after years living in the shadow of hurt and fear, I decided to return to the place that once gave me strength, Harborview Nursing Home. I had worked night shifts there for 20 years, caring for the elderly who'd been forgotten. Walking through the old iron gate, the familiar scent of disinfectant pulled at my heart. Residents still sat along the hallway, eyes turned toward the purple garden. The old manager, Teresa, recognized me and ran to hug me. "Eleanor, my goodness, how long has it been? I read all about you. You were brave." I smiled lightly. "Not brave, just done being silent." From that day on, I spent a few days each week there. I helped residents write letters, tell their stories, and more importantly, be heard. Many had been abandoned by their own children, labeled burdens, useless. Hearing them, I saw myself someone pushed aside because of age and silence. Once, an elderly man named George, a former teacher, said to me, "Miss Eleanor, people only grow old when they let others decide their worth." I laughed and answered, "Then maybe I'm younger than I think, George." The stories at the nursing home were therapy for my soul. I felt myself coming back to life piece by piece, not through victory, but through the peace of simply being myself. One evening, Nathan came to see me just as I finished a volunteer shift. He sat on a wooden bench outside, the golden sunset spilling over his brown hair. "Mom," he said, voice low and sincere, "thank you for not giving up." I sat next to him and looked toward the trees rustling in the wind. "It wasn't for you, Nathan," I answered gently. "It was for me too." He smiled. "I think you finally found yourself again." I nodded. I learned something. Love isn't about enduring, it's about having boundaries. When you love someone, you don't let them trample your dignity, whether it's your child or the person your child loves. Nathan squeezed my hand. "You're right, I learned that from you." That night, driving home, I turned on the radio. A classic jazz track played, the warm saxophone blending with raindrops on the window. I smiled for the first time in months. I didn't feel like anyone's victim. I was a survivor, a witness, and someone who had walked through the storm. News about the Green family faded, though people in town still whispered. Richard Green sold what was left to pay debts and left Charleston quietly. Isabella, the bride who once mocked me with a voice cold as steel, vanished from public life. No one mentioned her anymore, as if she'd never existed. Once I saw a note in a small cafe's paper. "Green family officially dissolves company." I folded it and said nothing. Some endings don't need our applause, only our release. And then I started writing. At first, just a few notes in an old notebook, but the words poured out as if they'd been waiting for years. I wrote about that party, about the sentence, "After tomorrow, you won't be part of this family anymore." I wrote about the pain, the pushback, and how the truth finally spoke. I titled the manuscript, "The Day I Was Erased," the day I was erased from the world. Not to relive the pain, but to remind myself and anyone pushed to the margins that we still exist and we still have a voice. I didn't send it to the press or post it online. I printed a few copies and kept them in a drawer at the nursing home. Whenever someone told me they felt invisible to their own family, I handed them a copy and smiled. "Read this. Maybe you'll realize you're not alone." One fall morning, I was invited to share my story at a community talk. I stood before nearly 100 people, mostly middle-aged women and a few silver-haired men. When I told them about the humiliation, the misunderstanding, and then standing up for myself, many cried. An elderly lady came up, took my hand and said, "You told my story, Eleanor. The difference is, you did what I didn't dare to do." I hugged her and whispered, "It's never too late to speak up." That night, back home, I sat on the porch as the wind off the Ashley River cooled the air. The streetlights cast a soft yellow over the damp road, and in that moment, I felt my heart settle. I remembered everything from those hospital night shifts and the tears over a cold cup of tea to the moment I stood before Isabella and said, "Watch me." My life, it turns out, was never truly erased. It only faded for a while, waiting for me to color it back in with courage and truth. I looked out and smiled softly. When someone tries to erase you from the picture, become the color they can't cover. And in that quiet night, I knew I had moved past the storm, not with victory, but with the light of self-respect. That night, I sat at the old wooden table and closed the brown leather journal I'd been writing for months. On the cover, I stuck a small label, "The Day I Was Erased." Inside was my whole story, from the shame of being cut out of a family to the day I stood up and took my dignity back. I looked up at the photo on the wall, a wedding picture that never happened. In the frame, Nathan is smiling brightly, and the space where Isabella would have been is empty. That empty space once broke my heart, but now I see it as something beautiful. It isn't the absence of love, it's the place reserved for the truth. I said softly, as if talking to my reflection. I don't need the title of perfect mother-in-law. I just need respect as a person and as a mother who loved and sacrificed the right way. For years, I believed silence was a kind of virtue, that enduring was how you kept the peace. But now I know silence isn't noble if it gives others a chance to crush your dignity. Life can take your honor for a while, but no one can take the truth. It stays hidden or twisted, but it finds a way back, like light slipping through a morning door. I poured myself a cup of black tea, the steam curling into the air. Outside, the wind from the Ashley River carried salt and rustling leaves. Charleston had settled into quiet with only a few lights across the water. I turned to the last pages of my journal where I wrote the final line. When people try to erase you from the picture, become the color they can't cover. I read it over and over and smiled. It wasn't just a message for me, it was for anyone who's ever been called invisible. I thought of the women at the nursing home, forgotten by their children, treated as burdens. Each of their stories was a life being slowly erased by neglect. But I believe if one person speaks up, others will start to believe they can too. So if you're still listening to me now, I want to ask you something. If it were you, would you stay silent, or would you stand up like I did? Would you bow your head to be called good, or lift it to live true to yourself? I don't expect everyone to do what I did. We all have different fears and limits. But I hope that, just once, you'll ask yourself, what is my worth? Who gets to define it for me? If you're still here with me now, let me say one thing. Slowly from the heart of a mother who has been hurt to your heart. Never let anyone make you believe you have no value. No one has the right to erase you from your own story. Even if people turn away, even if the world is quiet, you still have yourself, your voice, and your right to be loved. If my story brings someone to mind, a mother, a father, or even yourself, leave me a note. Tell me where you're listening from, what city, what country, or simply, I understand. I will read every word, because each message proves the truth still has someone listening. And if you believe, even just a little, that justice and self-respect are worth defending, please like, subscribe, and share this story. Not to make me famous, but so those who are hurting out there will know they are not alone. From Charleston, where the sunset still falls gently, like the calm years we once lost, I'm sending you a blessing and a gentle reminder. Speak up before someone else speaks for you. I am Eleanor Shaw, and I'm still here, still believing in the light, and still believing in you.
As soon as I stepped into the wedding garden, the very moment I expected to see my daughter walk out in her white dress, I froze. Hanging right at the entrance under 2 rows of glowing golden lights was a large board with a photo of me and my husband. Underneath, in bold letters sharp as a blade, it read, "Do not let these 2 people in, by order of the bride." I stood motionless while my husband, Mark, went red, then pale. Guests glanced at us with puzzled looks, but they didn't know one thing. This entire wedding was secretly paid for with my own money, and they also didn't know that just a few hours later, I would destroy this ceremony in a way no one could ever imagine. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Carter, 61 years old, living in a quiet town in Ohio. I never thought my life would lead to a day like this, standing at the entrance of my own daughter's wedding, treated like a stranger, even forbidden to step inside. That feeling didn't even resemble sadness anymore. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out, placed it on a scale, and declared that I wasn't worth a single cent in my daughter's eyes. We had driven more than 3 hours to get there. Mark prepared a small speech, folded neatly and tucked into his suit pocket. I had spent the entire night before wrapping a little wedding gift, a white lace handkerchief my mother left me, a family heirloom. I wanted to give it to my daughter on the most important morning of her life. Every small hope vanished the moment I saw that wretched photo. I turned to Mark. His eyes trembled in a way I had never seen. We'd been married for more than 40 years. I'd seen him angry, exhausted, defeated, but never hurt the way he was at that moment. "Evelyn, what is this?" he whispered, his voice breaking. I couldn't answer. I just stood there, my head spinning, my legs glued to the ground. A young hotel attendant walked toward us, his face full of worry. I'm really sorry. I was instructed that if the 2 of you showed up, we can't let you in. This is a direct order from the bride. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The bride he referred to was Meline Carter, my only child, the daughter I once held through long, feverish nights, the daughter I worked 2 shifts to pay for through college, the daughter I thought would hug me tightly on her wedding day. No, she chose to hang my picture outside the venue like I was a wanted criminal. Guests passing by glanced at us, some avoiding eye contact, others staring out of curiosity. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a public square, being stoned by the very person I raised. I squeezed Mark's hand. "Let's go," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He nodded. Neither of us said another word. We quietly turned away, each step heavier than the last. Every step felt like another cut to my heart. I heard the wedding music drifting from afar. The gentle violin sounded as if it were mocking my humiliation. When we reached the parking lot, I couldn't hold myself up anymore. I stopped, leaning against the car door, trying to breathe so I wouldn't collapse right there. I didn't want Mark to have to catch me like someone whose bones had just been shattered. "Evelyn, are you all right?" Mark asked, his voice trembling with worry. I pressed my lips together. "Mark, I really don't understand. Why would she do this? Why today, of all days?" He looked at me and shook his head. "I don't know, but standing here won't change anything. Let's go back to the hotel." We got into the car. Mark started the engine, but his hands were shaking. I placed my hand over his, searching for any warmth left in this moment of devastation. As the car rolled away from the dazzling wedding garden, I looked through the window. Everything behind us still looked beautiful, perfect, while inside, my heart had shattered into 1,000 pieces. On the way back to the hotel, I tried to stay calm, but tears streamed down my face. Images of Meline as a child replayed over and over, her messy blonde hair on school mornings, her bright laugh running across the yard, the tight hug she gave me the first time she earned an A. I once believed those sacrifices would be the bond between mother and daughter. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe when a child grows up with everything, she might accidentally see her mother's love as an obligation. I never imagined I had raised someone who could treat me as a burden. I tried to comfort myself. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Meline didn't know. Maybe someone else hung the sign without her knowing. But deep inside, I knew the truth. Meline knew. Meline agreed. Meline wanted this. I remembered the months preparing for the wedding, the moment I transferred $92,000 to the event planner, money I had saved for more than 30 years. I remembered how relieved I felt knowing my daughter would have the perfect day she dreamed of. I hid it from Meline because I thought if she knew I paid, she would feel embarrassed or guilty. I hid it out of love, out of a mother's instinct to protect. But today, standing forbidden at the wedding entrance, I realized my daughter didn't feel grateful at all. She saw me as a debt, or worse, an embarrassment to hide. The car stopped in front of the hotel. Mark turned off the engine, but he didn't step out. He turned to me. "Evelyn, I know this hurts, but you have to understand. She's not the little girl we raised anymore. She changed when she got involved with the Whitmore family." I looked down at my hands, the veins raised, the faint calluses from years in the laundromat. I had built my entire life around Meline. I never imagined the child I raised would be the one to push me out of her life on the most important day she had. I inhaled deeply. "Mark, did I do something wrong? Or are we just too poor, too ordinary for them?" Mark placed his warm hand on my shoulder. "No, Evelyn, we didn't do anything wrong, but sometimes being endlessly kind makes others think they have the right to walk all over you." I nodded, but inside me, something shifted, a feeling both painful and cold, as if a new door had opened, and behind it was a version of myself I had never dared to become, a version of Evelyn Carter, who would no longer bow her head. I looked out the window toward the golden lights of the wedding still flickering from afar. "Mark, you know what? I think I've been too gentle." "Gentle?" Mark frowned. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think it's time I take back everything I've given away." He stared at me, trying to read my thoughts, but even I wasn't fully certain yet. I only knew one thing. Tonight, I would no longer be the woman who endured humiliation in silence. A frightening yet clear idea began forming in my mind, slowly, quietly, but powerful enough to make me shiver. If Meline wanted to erase me from her life on her most important day, then I could show her exactly who held all the real power over this ceremony, and I would not shed another tear. I sat silently in the hotel room, my eyes still slightly swollen after hours of holding back tears. But as memories flooded back, I no longer felt humiliated. Instead, I felt hollow, as if an invisible hand was opening each drawer of my past, forcing me to look closely, from where I started to the moment I lost the very child I raised. I was born in a tiny town in northern Ohio where winter winds blew so cold the window glass froze every morning. My family was poor, not the kind of poor where you skip a few luxuries, but so poor my parents burned scrap wood and cardboard to keep us warm. I grew up surrounded by the hum of an old heater and dinners of thin soup. But my father taught me the most important thing. Being poor wasn't the same as being worthless. And my mother taught me that a woman must stand on her own 2 feet. I carried those lessons throughout my life. When I married Mark, we started from nothing. Mark worked as a delivery driver for a furniture company. I got a job at a small laundromat on Main Street. The pay was small, but we saved every cent by cutting every expense possible. I became familiar with the smell of detergent, the damp chill of clothes straight out of old machines. My youth lived between heavy laundry baskets and hours of standing on aching legs. But it didn't matter, because when Meline was born, every sacrifice became something I wanted to do. Meline was stunning from day one. Soft brown hair, blue-gray eyes she inherited from Mark, and a smile that made me forget the scent of bleach still clinging to my hands. From the moment she could walk, we gave her everything our limited means allowed. I remember waking early to make pancakes before school, coming home from my shift and stopping by the thrift store to find her a little pink dress she would love. I wanted my daughter to grow up with what I never had, safety and enough. Meline was brilliant. At 7, she read faster than her classmates. At 13, she won a small state science award. I cried with pride when her teacher told me, "Mrs. Carter, your daughter is exceptional." But sometimes I knew I spoiled her more than necessary. I justified it as making up for my own childhood. I thought loving more meant she would love me more. I was wrong. When she got into college, Mark and I worked harder so she wouldn't feel limited like we once did. I took on a second job cleaning offices at night. Every day I left the laundromat at 5, ate a quick sandwich, then worked until late. In winter, when snow piled thick and my back throbbed with pain, I still pushed through because I wanted her to have a future brighter than anything I could imagine. I don't remember how many hours I worked each week. I only remember holding that first $5,000 tuition bill and crying because I had actually managed to pay it. Meline knew I worked hard, but as she settled into college life, her calls became fewer. First several a week, then once a week, then only occasionally. I understood. She was becoming independent, living the life Mark and I had worked so hard to give her. I didn't resent it, but I will never forget the day she graduated. She wore a black gown, a square cap, and honor cord around her neck. When she looked at me and Mark, she beamed, a smile I once thought I would never lose. "Mom, I did it," she said, and I cried in the middle of the campus lawn. I was proud, so proud it hurt. But pride lasted only a short while. After she started working, Meline came home less. Her stories centered on coworkers, clients, business trips, fancy events in Columbus and Cleveland. We became background figures, appearing only during holidays. Then one day she called to say she wanted to bring her boyfriend home. I hoped he would be kind, like Mark, someone genuine, hardworking, steady. But when Andrew Whitmore stepped through the door, I knew immediately that my daughter's path had taken a sharp turn. Andrew was the type of man who believed he was above others. Expensive suit, gleaming watch, a voice polite yet cold. He shook Mark's hand with barely any pressure, then scanned our home as if assessing its monetary value. I disliked him instantly. But Meline, she was dazzled. Her eyes lit up whenever he spoke about managing finances, his wealthy family in Chicago, vacations in the Florida Keys. I saw clearly she was mesmerized by a world we had never belonged to and had never sought. I stayed polite, joined the conversation, but felt the first needle prick at the bond between me and my daughter. The second meeting was worse. The Whitmore family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. The moment I stepped inside, I felt out of place. White tablecloths, layered wine glasses, dishes. Expensive enough to cover a week of rent. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked me up and down and said, "Oh, you made it." Polite words, cold tone. All dinner long, she questioned my laundromat job, not out of interest, but superiority. Andrew spoke about the family's business investments, elite social circles, exclusive events. Every sentence implied that Meline was moving up into a world far above us. Mark tried to stay composed, but his eyes often dropped to the tablecloth, anger mixed with resignation. That night, riding home, I sat in the back seat silently asking myself, what had I created? How had I raised a child who didn't notice the disrespect from the family she was marrying into? I never found an answer. Medeline's changes came gradually but clearly. She visited less, called less. When she did come home, she talked only about Andrew, where they went, who they met, their elevated plans for the future. Not once did she ask if I was still working 2 jobs, or how my health was, or if Mark was doing all right. The distance grew, and for the first time in my motherhood, I feared losing my daughter. The turning point came when Meline announced Andrew had proposed. I wanted to be happy, but her smile wasn't the smile I used to know. It was the smile of someone stepping into a life where we were merely shadows behind her. That was the first small crack in my heart, a crack that the sign at the wedding entrance shattered entirely. I sat on the hotel bed holding the lace handkerchief, asking myself, how did I raise her for her to remove me from her life in the most brutal way? But that question had no time for answers, because a harsher truth settled in. Today was merely the result of a long chain of hurts. Hurts I had ignored because I kept telling myself my daughter still loved me the way she once did. I didn't know then that all of this was only the beginning of deeper pain and betrayal waiting ahead. I was still leaning against the hotel headboard, gripping the lace handkerchief as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling apart. Memories of Meline and years of raising her twisted together in my mind, carrying me toward another moment I should have recognized sooner, the first dinner with the Whitmore family. Looking back, it feels like the first chapter of a book I wish I had never opened. That afternoon, I woke earlier than usual to clean the house. I wanted our small home to look warm and tidy. I baked apple pie, Medeline's childhood favorite, thinking it might make her feel like she was coming back to the home she grew up in. I polished the wooden dining table and placed a vase of white daisies in the center. Mark went to the grocery store for extra drinks, nervously asking me, should I wear the blue shirt or the white one? I laughed and said, either one, Mark. They're coming to meet us, not interview us. He chuckled softly, but I knew he was anxious. Both of us wanted to make a good impression on the man our daughter had chosen. When the doorbell rang, my heart pounded as if I were preparing for an important ceremony. Meline walked in first, her hair softly curled, her face glowing. She gave me a quick hug, then stepped aside to introduce Andrew. Andrew wore a charcoal shirt under an expensive blazer, and his shoes were so shiny I could have seen my reflection in them. He smiled and extended his hand, but his eyes swept across my living room as if he were checking the value of every item. I had never liked that look. It wasn't the look of someone curious or wanting to know his future wife's family. It was the look of someone appraising merchandise. "Wonderful. Thank you for having me," Andrew said, his voice polite, crisp, and a bit too perfectly measured. I invited them to sit and brought out the apple pie. Meline took a bite and smiled, a rare smile I hadn't seen on her in a long time. But Andrew only tasted a small piece and said, "Oh, very homey." His tone sounded both like praise and like a subtle suggestion that my baking wasn't quite up to standard. Mark glanced at me, and I just smiled as if I hadn't heard anything. But the moment I went into the kitchen to pour tea, I heard Andrew whisper to Meline, "Too sweet. You know I don't like old-fashioned baked goods." Meline let out a soft laugh. "Mom's been making it like that forever." I stood there behind the kitchen door for a few seconds, feeling the air around me disappear. But I walked out again, keeping my smile, convincing myself I was being oversensitive. It was the first meeting, I reminded myself, and I wanted to believe Andrew was simply a little snobbish, not a bad person. I was wrong. A week later, Andrew's family invited us to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Columbus. I had already felt uneasy when Meline called earlier and said, "Mom, just wear something comfortable." That sentence made me anxious. Her idea of comfortable was nothing like what comfortable meant for me. I chose a simple navy dress Mark had given me for our anniversary. It wasn't brand name, but it was clean, lovely, and appropriate. Mark wore the blue shirt I had picked for him last time. We walked into the restaurant. Warm, dim lighting, soft violin music, the faint scent of wine drifting through the air. I felt like I was stepping into a world that wasn't meant for me. The Whitmore family was already seated. Margaret, Andrew's mother, looked up and scanned me from head to toe. Her gaze lingered slightly too long on my shoes, then moved to Mark, then to the inexpensive handbag I was holding. "Oh," she said, lips curving faintly. "Very simple." I heard her clearly. Everyone did. But Mark gave a polite smile, and I tried not to let the heat of embarrassment rise up my cheeks. Dinner began with questions disguised as small talk, but laced with condescension. Margaret asked what I did for a living. I answered honestly. I worked at a small laundromat near our home. She raised an eyebrow. "Ah, that must be quite tiring." I knew that tone. People used it when they didn't want to openly admit they looked down on your job. Then she turned to Mark. She asked whether a delivery driver's salary was sufficient. The question carried no kindness at all, and I saw Mark's back stiffen and his hand tighten around the napkin. Meanwhile, Andrew talked about his family, about their investment companies, about parties in Chicago, about real estate projects I couldn't even understand. Every word he said felt like a reminder of the distance between their world and ours. Margaret looked at Meline with calculated pride. "She's so smart, so beautiful. She deserves a better future, don't you think?" I knew exactly what she meant by a better future, and I knew she said it deliberately in front of me. But I stayed silent. I didn't want to make Meline uncomfortable. Mark, unlike me, couldn't hide his emotions well. He kept glancing at me, his eyes filled with frustration and helplessness. but he restrained himself. For Meline. For what was supposed to be a beautiful evening. A little later, Andrew took Madeline's hand, kissed the back of it, and announced, "I've proposed to Meline. My family will take care of the entire wedding. We want a ceremony that matches our standards." Meline nearly teared up with joy. I felt my heart beat slow, not because I wasn't happy for her, but because something inside me suddenly sharpened. Something was wrong. I couldn't explain it. It felt like a cold draft down my spine, like an alarm quietly going off in the back of my mind. I looked at the Whitmores, the perfect smiles, the arrogant eyes, the polished words, and I knew nothing here was genuine. Not the promises, not the generosity, not the welcome they pretended to give Meline. And it didn't take long for that intuition to prove itself in the cruelest way possible. The days after the dinner in Columbus, the uneasiness stayed with me. It wasn't a sudden blow like lightning. It was a slow, creeping fog settling into every corner of my thoughts. I tried to deny it, telling myself my daughter was simply growing up, stepping into a world I wasn't familiar with. But then, one afternoon, Meline came to my house. And the moment she spoke, I knew the change wasn't small anymore. I had just finished my shift at the laundromat, my hand still carrying a faint scent of detergent. Meline walked in, dressed neatly as if she had just left an important office meeting. I invited her to sit in the kitchen, where I had prepared 2 cups of mint tea, our old habit whenever she visited. But this time, she didn't look at the tea, didn't ask if I was tired. She only leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as if she were preparing for a negotiation rather than talking to her mother. "Mom," she began, her voice light as if hiding something, "Andrew's family has decided they'll cover the entire wedding cost." I forced myself to stay calm. "Oh, I see. Yes, so you and Dad don't need to worry about anything." She said it with a relieved expression, as if she had just dropped a burden she'd been carrying. But that relief pierced me. Since when had our lack of wealth become something that embarrassed her? I nodded and smiled. "If that's what you want, I won't object." Meline hugged me briefly, then left almost immediately. When the door shut behind her, the house felt strangely cold. I stood still for a long moment, a nameless weight pressing on my chest. Something wasn't right. I picked up the phone and searched for the event planning company Meline had mentioned the night before. When the staff answered, I tried to sound casual. "Hi, I'm the mother of the bride, Meline Carter. I'd like to ask about the event cost." The woman quickly opened the file. "Yes, the estimated total is $92,000, but we haven't received any deposit or payment yet." I went silent. I had to take a deep breath before answering. "None at all?" "That's correct. We're waiting for the contract holder to make the transfer." When I hung up, my hands were ice cold. So the Whitmore family never planned to pay. Every generous promise had been a performance. A show meant to make Meline feel lucky to be marrying into their world, and to make her believe they were a stronger support system than the parents who raised her. I sat down, staring out at the backyard where the old maple tree stood, silent as if listening, and the only thought I had was, if they won't pay, what will happen to the wedding? And worse, did Meline know? Or was she also a victim of their shiny lies? I couldn't let my daughter be humiliated. No matter how much she had changed, no matter how much it hurt, I was still her mother. And a mother doesn't let her child fall in front of hundreds of people. That night, I called the event planning company back. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll pay the entire cost, but one condition. Do not tell anyone, including the bride, that I am the one paying." The staff member hesitated, then agreed. I transferred the money in 3 large payments, amounts I never imagined I would spend in my lifetime. When it was done, I sat alone in the dark living room, listening to the dry ticking of the wall clock. I had emptied nearly all the savings Mark and I had built over 30 years, money meant for our peaceful retirement. But the part that hurt most wasn't the money. It was knowing that if Andrew or the Whitmores claimed later that they paid for everything, Meline would believe them immediately without asking me a single question. In the following days, whenever Meline called, not to check on me, but to gush about how generous Andrew's family was, my heart shrank a little more. I heard her pride in things I knew were lies. I smiled through the phone, hiding the hollow ache inside. I wanted to tell her the truth, but every time I tried, I imagined her face, bright eyes, confident voice, blind trust in the Whitmore family. I feared she'd think I was jealous, or worse, that I wanted to sabotage her wedding, so I stayed silent. I told myself her happiness was enough, that she would eventually understand my love. But as time passed, she called less. Messages became shorter. "I'm busy, Mom," or "Don't worry, I've got everything handled." I felt myself being pushed out of the very life I had built for her. Stories of the Whitmores filled the space between us. She dined with them, traveled with them, attended their exclusive parties, never once inviting me. Every photo she posted made me disappear a little more. I realized then it wasn't that their world was too big. It was that they wanted mine to become too small for her to see. One morning, while I was folding clothes at the laundromat, Mark called. Meline had texted that she couldn't come for dinner that weekend. She had a business networking event with Andrew's family. I only said, "It's okay, don't be upset." But inside, memories of raising her scattered like fallen leaves in a storm. Distance doesn't come in one day. It arrives from many quiet moments. Moments when I convinced myself everything was fine. Moments when I ignored hurtful words. Moments when I believed motherly love was a wall that could never collapse. But the wall had already fallen, and I stood among the rubble, not knowing how to make my daughter see me the way she once did. I didn't know then that everything I had endured was only the beginning of something far more painful and far more cruel, something that would lead to the moment I was humiliated at her wedding entrance, and then to the moment I decided to reclaim the power I had given away for so many years. I remember that afternoon vividly. Gray skies, heavy clouds, hanging low over Ohio like a warning. I stood in front of Meline's apartment door for a long time before pressing the bell. Not because I was afraid of being turned away, but because I feared hearing something that would hurt even more than what I had already suffered. But I knew I had to go. I had to talk. I had to understand what was happening to the daughter I had spent my entire life protecting. I inhaled deeply and rang the bell. The door opened within 3 seconds, and instead of Meline, it was Andrew standing there. He wore a white shirt buttoned to the collar, holding his phone like whatever conversation he'd been having was more important than anything else. When he saw me, his eyebrows tightened. Just slightly, but enough for me to understand I was not a welcome sight. "Ah, Mrs. Carter." He glanced at his watch. "Meline didn't say you were coming today." I forced politeness into my voice. "I just want to talk to her for a moment. Just a few minutes." Andrew stepped aside, though stiffly, as if he were letting in a delivery person rather than his future mother-in-law. I walked in, trying to smile, though the coldness in that beautifully decorated apartment made me shiver. It was elegant and perfectly arranged, but missing something I couldn't name: warmth, soul, life. Meline came out of the bedroom holding a thick clipboard. Her hair was pulled into a high ponytail and she wore a sleek, smart band on her wrist. She looked at me, hesitated for a second, then said, slightly rushed, "Mom, I'm getting ready for a meeting with the wedding planner. What do you need?" A simple question, but not a hint of joy at seeing me. I forced a bright expression. "I just wanted to check if you needed any help. The wedding is coming soon." Meline sighed. "Andrew's family is handling everything. You really don't need to worry." The way she stressed the word "they" made me pause. Still, I swallowed it down, trying to keep my voice steady. "What about our seating for the ceremony? No one from the planning team has contacted me, so I just want to be sure." Meline glanced at Andrew as if seeking permission. Andrew shrugged, then answered for her. "There are many important guests from my family, so your table will be a standard one in the middle section. It can't be near the stage." I looked at them. 3 seconds passed, long enough to age someone. I turned to Meline. "You decided that?" Meline reluctantly nodded. "Mom, there will be business people, Dad Andrew's friends. You understand, right? You and Dad still get a nice table, just not the main one." I once thought I was strong, but hearing that felt like a stone dropping onto my chest, not because of the seating, because for the first time, my daughter saw me as someone outside her life. I tried to keep my voice from shaking. "And the tradition of your father walking you down the aisle?" Meline looked at Andrew again. That single glance told me everything. My daughter was no longer someone who would speak for herself. She was waiting for him to speak for her. Andrew cleared his throat. "We're not doing that old giving the bride away tradition. Meline will walk in alone. She's independent. It's modern." Meline gave a small, awkward smile. "You understand, right? I don't want to look like a traditional bride." The word traditional felt like a cold blade pressing into my chest. All those years I held on to traditions, family dinners, holidays, little routines that shaped Medeline's childhood, now dismissed as outdated burdens. I stared at my daughter, the same child who once ran through our backyard as Mark and I chased after her, the child who clung to me during nightmares, the child who cried when classmates teased her. And there she was, telling me everything I represented was an embarrassment. "Why, Meline?" I asked softly. "Why don't you want your father and me near you on your wedding day?" She froze for only a second. Then she looked away as if searching for the kindest possible lie. "It's not like that, Mom. It's just, there are certain images we need to present at the wedding. You know, Andrew's family does big business. I don't want to make them uncomfortable." I heard the meaning behind every word. I understood that we, Mark and I, did not fit the image my daughter wanted to display. I took a deep breath. "Let me ask you one thing, Meline. Do you still see your father and me as family?" Meline grew uneasy and turned away. Andrew stood right behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, as if both comforting her and asserting control. "Mom, don't make this a big deal," Meline said. "I'm very busy." Busy. One simple word, yet it drew a clear line between us. I found myself standing in my own daughter's apartment, feeling like every decoration and every color on the walls whispered the same message: "You don't belong here anymore." I nodded. "I understand." I turned around. Andrew didn't walk me out, and Meline didn't follow. When the door closed behind me, I stood in the cold, bright hallway, my hands trembling, and then I cried. Not the angry, heaving kind of cry. It was the cry of someone stripped of the most sacred place she'd ever held in life, the place of being a mother. I cried so hard I didn't hear the elevator open. Mark was waiting for me in the car. When I got in, he saw my swollen eyes and didn't ask anything. He simply placed his hand over mine, lightly, but enough for me to feel the grief spreading through every part of me. I leaned my head against the window, watching the blur of cars outside. The air inside the car felt heavy as lead. Mark spoke softly. "Evelyn, don't let her hurt you like this. I know how much you love her, but maybe she's not the little girl she used to be." I nodded without looking at him. "But I still hope on her wedding day she'll realize how unreasonable she's been. I still want to believe that." Mark gently squeezed my hand. Hope is the last thing we should let go of. But deep in my heart, I knew that hope was already cracking. I felt like I was clinging to a rope that was fraying strand by strand, held together only by fragile belief. I didn't know that. Just days later, that same daughter would leave me standing before a wedding gate, staring at a picture that barred me from entering, and the heartbreak of this afternoon would become the final warning I failed to heed. 1 week before the wedding, when, under normal circumstances, I should have been counting down the hours until my daughter stepped into a new chapter, Meline called me. I remember clearly. I was in the kitchen, just lifting the lid off a pot of chicken soup when the ICO phone buzzed. Her voice sounded calm, but underneath that calmness was something sharp, something only a mother who'd grown accustomed to disappointment could detect. "Mom," she said quickly, as if she had another meeting waiting. "I need your help with something." I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "All right, go ahead." And then, with one single sentence, she delivered a blow so staggering that even now, when I remember it, my chest feels hollowed out. "Mom, can you cut everyone from our side of the guest list? Andrew's family guests are increasing. I need to prioritize people. Important for my future." I froze. The spoon slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a small but echoing clang that filled the quiet kitchen like the toll of a bell. I couldn't speak for several seconds. I just stood there, trying to register what my daughter had asked of me. "Meline," I whispered, my voice trembling like a child's first lie. "Cut? Everyone?" But they already received their invitations. "We double-checked," Meline replied, still breezy. "Your list has a lot of people who really don't have anything to do with my new life. They don't serve any purpose for me and Andrew." It felt like a slap across my face, not because she wanted to cut guests, but because of how she spoke about the very people who had helped me raise her through the hardest years, the ones who brought over cans of soup when money was tight, who babysat her when I worked double shifts, who treated her like family though we shared no blood. "You're saying they don't serve any purpose for your future?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt like it was blocked with stone. Meline sighed as if I was the difficult one. "Mom, don't make this heavy. It's my wedding. I want everything perfect. Andrew's family has a lot of important connections. You know that. I can't seat his father's business partners next to our relatives from Dayton. It just wouldn't look right." My hand began to shake. "But they're our family, sweetheart." Meline went silent for a few seconds. Then she dropped the sentence that shoved me off the cliff. "Family has limits too, Mom. You understand that." No, I did not understand. I had always believed sacrifice was the language of motherhood, that if I loved her enough, she would know. But in that moment, I realized some children, when placed under glittering lights, forget the warm lamps that once kept them safe. Meline continued, brisk and decisive. Please notify everyone. Just tell them there's a seating issue. Make it sound polite for me." I leaned against the counter because without it, I might have collapsed. I couldn't believe this was the same little girl who once clung to my leg and cried when another child refused to share a toy. "All right," I whispered. "I'll take care of it." There was no "thank you," no hesitation, just a quick "good, I'm busy, Mom." And then the line went dead. I looked around the kitchen, the towel, the chicken soup, the spoon on the floor. Everything seemed familiar, yet I no longer recognized myself. That night, I called each relative, my cousin, my 2 nieces, my elderly aunt in Cincinnati, Uncle Harold's family, people who had never once missed any milestone in our lives. And each time I had to repeat the lie, "Oh, it's just a seating issue. We have to cut back. Please understand." Every voice on the other end carried disappointment softened by kindness. "It's all right, Evelyn, as long as she's happy." I bit my lip until I tasted blood just to stop myself from crying on the phone. When I hung up after the last call, I couldn't hold back any longer. I set the phone down and let the tears fall. Not just tears of hurt, but of betrayal over how my daughter had trampled every value that once held our family together. Mark heard me crying and rushed in from the living room. He held me without asking because he already knew. He had seen the distance growing every day. I pressed my face into his shoulder, my voice breaking. "Mark, she said our family doesn't serve any purpose for her future." Mark closed his eyes, his hands gripping my shoulders. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I know you're hurting, but you don't deserve this. You don't." I shook my head, tears falling on his shirt like ink stains. "What if we tell her the truth? You paid all $92,000. She wouldn't disrespect us like this if she knew," Mark said plainly. I stayed silent for a long time. Then I shook my head. "No, not now. If she finds out I paid, she'll shame herself in front of her new family. She'll think I did it to pressure her or out of jealousy. I don't want that." Mark looked at me, his eyes a mix of worry and heartbreak. "But if you keep letting her treat you like this..." I cut in softly. "On her wedding day, she'll see me there. She'll realize how wrong she's been. I believe that. The wedding will be the moment she understands." I said it, but deep down I knew that hope was fragile. So fragile that the slightest breeze could shatter it. I wanted to believe in my daughter so badly it made me foolish. I wanted to think that somewhere inside her there was still room for me. That night I cried until I was exhausted, until my eyes burned. I fell asleep with that tiny, flickering hope that the wedding would mend what had been broken. But I was wrong. When the wedding day arrived, I fixed my silvering hair, put on the navy dress Mark loved most, and held the small gift I'd wrapped all week. I stepped out of the hotel with my heart full of hope. Hope that my daughter would see me, smile, and run to hug me like she used to. Instead, when Mark and I stepped up to the garden gate, under the soft glow of golden lights, a massive sign greeted us. On it was our picture, and the bold, slicing words, "Do not let these two in. Bride's orders." In that moment, the last drop of hope inside me was crushed into dust, and I, someone who once believed love was enough, stood there learning how to breathe again after having my heart shattered. I don't remember how I got back to the hotel. I only remember sitting stiffly in the car, hands trembling in my lap, unable to process any of it. Mark placed his hand on my back, rubbing slow circles, but the hollow ache in my chest didn't ease. It wasn't a pain of the body. It was deeper, hollowing. When Mark closed the door behind us, I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in my freezing hands. and like a string pulled too tight, finally snapping, I broke into sobs. Not soft sobs, choking ones, the kind that makes breathing impossible. Humiliation, grief, betrayal, confusion, everything crashed over me at once. Mark sat beside me, holding on to my shoulders. Evelyn, we don't need to stay here. I'll pack our bags. We'll leave right now. We'll go home. Forget this ever happened. I wanted to nod. I wanted to say, yes, let's go. But inside me was a strange emptiness, as if I had lost a part of myself, and leaving now felt like admitting my daughter had the right to hurt me without consequence. I tried to inhale, but the breath dissolved before reaching my chest. Mark, I don't know what to do. He stroked my hair. We'll go home. You don't need to take any more of this. I was about to answer when my phone suddenly rang. Unknown number. Ohio area code, but not saved in my contacts. Mark gestured for me not to pick up, but something, I couldn't name what, made me reach for the phone. Hello? I whispered, my voice rough. A young woman's shaky voice came through, someone who seemed to have struggled before deciding to call. Mrs. Carter? Is this you? My name is Chelsea Rivera. I'm one of the event coordinators at the Linden Garden tonight. I blinked. Chelsea? I don't think we've met. I know, she said. I heard her swallow, then her voice quickened. But I saw what happened at the gate. I was standing inside when they put the sign up. I'm so sorry I witnessed it and couldn't do anything. I gripped the phone, my palms dampening. You're calling because of that? Not just because of that, Mrs. Carter. Her voice dropped, trembling slightly. I'm calling because I know you're the one who paid for the entire wedding tonight. My fingers went numb. How do you know that? I asked, my voice almost colorless. Because I checked the contracts before the event. Every receipt, every payment record, every signature, everything has your name on it. You're the only one who paid in full. There isn't a single cent from the Whitmore family. My heart thudded so hard I pressed my hand against my chest. A long stretch of silence passed between two breaths. Chelsea continued, her voice thick with hesitation. And there's something else you should know. I heard her swallow again as if bracing herself. 2 hours before the ceremony, I walked past the bridal suite. I overheard the bride and the Whitmore family talking. They were talking about you. The air around me froze. Chelsea? What did they say? Her voice trembled, but each word stabbed like a blade. They called you trashy and poor. They mocked you for trying to act classy. They said the wedding would be less embarrassing if you didn't show up. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. Chelsea pressed on, her voice full of pity. I saw the bride, Madeline, smile when they talked about the no entry sign. They said it would solve the problem once and for all. Mark heard enough to rush over and hold me, but I couldn't feel his warmth. I only heard Chelsea's voice, small but sharp as broken glass. Mrs. Carter, I can't stay quiet, not when I know the truth. You have the right to cancel the entire event, all of it, because you paid for it, and you can do it at any moment tonight. I opened my eyes. The hotel room spun around me. I have that right? I asked, sounding like a stranger to myself. Yes, you're the contract holder. If you request the sound to stop, the lights to go off, the service to end, we have to obey immediately. For a moment, I heard nothing but the rush of blood in my ears, like waves hitting rock. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel. Power. Not the power of money, the power of truth, the power of justice, the power that comes when someone is pushed so low that standing back up becomes its own form of strength. "Mrs. Carter," Chelsea asked, "are you still there?" I placed a hand over my chest because for the first time in months, my heart wasn't just aching, it was awakening. "Yes," I whispered, "I'm here." "Would you like me to send over the document confirming your right to terminate the event?" I looked at Mark. He was watching me as if asking, "Evelyn, what are you thinking?" But I couldn't answer him, not yet. Not when a door inside me, one I had always kept locked, was opening wider with every second. Chelsea spoke again, her voice steady and sincere. "Mrs. Carter, I know you're a good person, but sometimes good people need protection from those who take advantage of their kindness." I inhaled slowly, and an idea, terrifying but perfectly logical, began to take shape in my mind, a thought that the version of me from a few years ago would have trembled at and pushed away immediately. But the version of me now? I had been pushed to the very edge. I had been humiliated in front of strangers. I had been stripped of my place as a mother by my own daughter. I had been trampled on by people who saw me as nothing but weeds in their lives. And now, when Chelsea spoke her final sentence, "You just have to say the word, one word," I understood that my kindness had been stepped on one time too many. I understood that some lessons can only be taught through silence, and some lessons can only be taught through action. And I, the gentle mother who had endured all her life, began to see with painful clarity the path I had to take next. No more trembling, no more weakness, only one decision, cold, rational, and entirely mine. After hanging up with Chelsea, I sat still for a long time, still enough to hear the hum of the air conditioner and the faint traffic far below. Mark sat beside me, his hand resting softly on my knee, like a thread keeping me attached to reality. But inside, I knew I had just crossed a line I could never return from. "Evelyn," Mark whispered, "what are you thinking?" I lifted my head and looked straight into his eyes. For the first time throughout this ordeal, I no longer said, "I don't know." "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that it's time she understands that actions have consequences, not through words, through the one thing she's clinging to, this wedding." Mark was silent. He didn't rush to comfort me, nor did he try to dissuade me. He simply looked at me for a long time, then nodded, heavy, reluctant. "So, what are you planning to do?" I inhaled deeply and picked up my phone. My fingers still trembled slightly, but this time out of adrenaline, not fear. I opened the contact card Chelsea had sent. The hotel manager, Mr. Harris. I made the call. The phone rang a few times before a polite middle-aged man answered. "Good evening. This is Christopher Harris, manager at the Linden Garden. How may I help you?" "This is Evelyn Carter," I said plainly, "the person listed on all contracts for tonight's wedding. I need to confirm a few things." His tone shifted immediately, becoming more careful. "Yes, of course, Mrs. Carter. I have your file right here." I heard the shuffle of papers and the tapping of a keyboard. My heart beat steadily now, not fast, not erratic. For the first time, I felt myself speaking without bowing my head, without asking for permission. "I want to know," I said clearly, "whose name appears on every contract related to tonight's wedding, the venue, decor, catering, sound, and lighting." "Let me check," Mr. Harris replied. A few seconds later, he continued. "All contracts are under your name, Mrs. Carter. Every payment we received came from your account. There is no Whitmore name on any document." I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Hearing what I already knew, but from someone with authority, made it feel heavier, more final. In that case, I continued, legally, the person who has the right to cancel or stop all services during the event is me, correct? A pause, then a quiet exhale. Under contract principles, yes, Mrs. Carter. If you request that services stop, we must comply. But I must warn you, that would cause significant disruption. I understand, I cut in calmly. I am not asking you to do it now. I simply need you to confirm that if I call back and request all music, service, lighting, and venue use to stop, you will do so, correct? There was something like respect, maybe even fear in his voice when he responded, Yes, Mrs. Carter, if you, as the paying client, request it, I will proceed, but I hope you consider this carefully. I already have, I replied. One more thing. I want every decision, communication, and adjustment tonight documented. Emails, internal notes, all of it must have a clear trail. Of course, he said, we will email you a confirmation. It will state clearly that you are the one requesting service termination. Thank you, Mr. Harris, I said, my voice low. I may call again tonight. When I do, I expect everything to follow what you've just confirmed. I understand, Mrs. Carter, he answered, and I'm sorry for what happened at the gate. No mother deserves that. I didn't address the last sentence. I simply said, have a memorable evening, and ended the call. Mark stared at me, eyes wide. Evelyn, you're really going to do it? I turned to him. Do you think I have another choice? She dragged me to the lowest point she could find. If I stay silent, I'm only teaching her that she can trample others without consequences. Mark put his arm around my shoulders. I won't stop you. I'm only hurting because I know tonight will be the final nail in the door between you and her. I nodded softly. That door? It's been locked for a long time, Mark. I just refuse to admit it. I straightened up and pulled my laptop closer. The light from the screen reflected off my tired, calloused hands. I opened a new email, typing with a calmness that almost frightened me. Recipient, Margaret Whitmore, Andrew's mother. Subject, regarding your family's generosity for tonight's wedding. I began, Dear Mrs. Whitmore, this is Evelyn Carter, the bride's mother. First, thank you for proudly telling everyone that your family covered all the wedding expenses. That must feel wonderful for you. Attached are all contracts, invoices, and bank payment receipts in case you'd like to refresh your memory. In case it has escaped your attention, every dollar of the $92,000 spent on tonight's wedding was paid by me. Not you, not Andrew, not anyone named Whitmore. If you'd still like to boast about your family's generosity tonight, feel free to do so, with full understanding of the truth. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter. I attached everything. Hotel invoices, transfer receipts, contracts bearing my signature, even the PDF bank. Statements I downloaded earlier, irrefutable. I didn't send it yet. I scheduled the email to send automatically at 8:30 p.m., just when everyone would be seated, the dinner service underway, and the Whitmores likely bragging loudly. I closed the laptop, then reopened it. There was still one more thing. I found my sister's contact, Linda Carter, the one who stood by me through the hardest years, the one Madeline erased from the guest list without hesitation. I called her. Sis? Linda answered after 2 rings. I've been waiting for your call. How is everything over there? I paused, then asked, Are you home? Yes, we're all having dinner. We keep wondering how the wedding is going. I didn't want to bother you. I swallowed. Linda, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to stay calm when you hear what I'm about to say. Her tone changed instantly. "Don't scare me. What happened?" I told her. Every detail. From paying the entire wedding cost, to Meline cutting the whole family from the list, to the sign with our picture banning us from entering. Linda didn't speak. I heard rushed breathing, a chair scraping back, someone in her house asking, "What's wrong?" and then silence. When I finished, Linda exhaled shakily, so deeply I heard the strain in her ribs. "Sis," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please don't tell me you're still there. I'm at a hotel nearby, but Linda, I didn't call just to vent. I need you to do something." "Anything," she said immediately. "Tell me." "I need you to call every single relative Meline erased from the list. Tell them the truth. Tell them I paid for everything. Tell them she banned her own parents at the door. Tell them she said our family serves no purpose for her future." Silence. I knew Linda was hold her back fury. "You want them to know?" she finally asked. "I want," I said softly, "that when Meline spins her story later, our family already knows the truth. I'm not asking them to storm the wedding. I just don't want them carrying shame on my behalf anymore." Linda inhaled sharply. "All right, I'll do it. I swear by tonight our whole family will know who has heart and who threw it away." Her voice softened. "Sis, I'm sorry I'm not there with you right now." I gave a faint, tired smile. "You are here, just in a different way." We ended the call. Staring at my phone, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. Even if Meline cut herself off, the people who walked with me through hardship still stood firmly by my side. And tonight, I wouldn't let anyone, not even my daughter, cut that bond again. One last task remained before the moment of reckoning. I opened another file, a draft of my will I had prepared with my attorney in Ohio. I had planned to revise it after the wedding, adding Meline more clearly as a beneficiary. Now, there was no need. I called my attorney, Mr. Jackson. "Evelyn, I thought you'd be at the wedding tonight," he said, surprised. "I'm still here," I replied, "but something has changed. I need to revise my will immediately, at least the draft and email confirmation before Monday." He shifted into professional tone quickly. "All right, tell me what you'd like to update." I spoke firmly. "I want Meline Carter removed from all inheritance. The house, savings, life insurance, my small share in the laundromat, everything. I want it reassigned to Mark and then, if Mark passes before me, transferred to a charity fund supporting older women in hardship." He paused. "Are you certain, Evelyn? This is a significant decision." "Tonight," I said, "I received the clearest answer about what I mean to her. I'm not punishing her, Mr. Jackson. I'm simply placing her where she's chosen to be, outside the center of my life." He exhaled heavily. "I'll draft the changes and send them to you for review. Come in Monday for final signatures." "Thank you," I said, "and please keep this confidential." "Of course," he replied. "Evelyn, this isn't cruelty. Sometimes protecting yourself is a form of love too, painful as it is." I closed the laptop. The hotel room felt like a temporary fortress, a place where I was gathering the scattered pieces of my dignity and rebuilding them into one final barrier. Mark had watched everything silently. He didn't interrupt, didn't protest. He sat at the edge of the bed, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Mark," I turned to him, "if I go through with this, will you resent me?" He looked at me for a long moment. His tired eyes were sincere. "I've watched you endure more than any woman I know. If tonight is the night you stand up for yourself, I will stand with you. I hurt for her, but I hurt for you far more." I rested my head on his shoulder. "Tonight, Madeline's life will change. And so will ours, Mark murmured. In a way, we'll both be freed. I opened my laptop again, not to send more messages or make more calls. I went into my storage folder and gathered every piece of evidence: contracts, invoices, bank statements, screenshots of messages, the email confirmation with the hotel, the new will draft. I placed them all into one folder named Truth. I copied it onto a small silver USB drive I always kept in my purse, then uploaded a duplicate to a private email account meant only for backups. If one day I was no longer here, there would still be enough truth to silence any lies. When everything was finally in place, I looked at the clock. 7:50 p.m. Surely by now, Meline was standing in the ceremony hall, her hand in Andrew's, smiling in front of 300 guests, believing tonight was the most perfect night of her life, believing she had completely removed two poor nobodies from the flawless picture she wanted to present. She didn't know, couldn't even imagine, that every light above her, every piece of music playing, every chair she and her groom sat on, all depended on one phone call from the mother whose photo she had just posted at the entrance with a ban. And tonight, I would make her understand something she had never learned in her entire life. No one can build their happiness on humiliating the person who gave birth to them and raised them without paying a price. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Then I opened them again, staring straight at my phone screen, where Mr. Harris's number still sat in my call history. I didn't call right away. I left a pause for myself to confirm one last time that this wasn't from impulse or anger. This was the decision of a woman pushed to her final limits, who had thought, endured, forgiven far too many times, and was now choosing to stand on her own side. When that pause ended, I knew it was time. I tightened my grip on the phone and waited for the perfect moment to destroy the wedding I had spent my entire life paying for, only to receive the rawest betrayal in return. Chelsea sent the update just as the clock struck 8:10. "They're all seated, Mrs. Carter. The appetizers will be brought out in a few minutes." Her voice was small but full of meaning. I understood. This was the exact right moment. I set the phone down for a moment. Mark was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, silently looking down at the dim parking lot. When I walked toward him, he turned, his eyes heavy but steady. "Evelyn, are you sure?" I didn't answer with words. I simply took his hand. That hand had guided me through so many hardships, but tonight it became the support I needed to walk into the most decisive moment of my life as a mother. I pressed the call button. Mr. Harris picked up immediately, as if he had been waiting for every second. "Mrs. Carter?" I drew a deep breath. "It's time." No questions, just one crisp reply. "Yes, ma'am. We'll proceed immediately." I set the phone down. Inside me, a strange emptiness spread. A feeling like closing a door that had been open for decades, a door I had never believed I would have the courage to shut. Only a few minutes later, my phone buzzed repeatedly. Chelsea texted, "The sound is off. Everyone is confused. The bride is looking around, panicking." I closed my eyes, imagining the scene inside the venue. The main hall of the Linden Garden, once glowing with warm golden lights, soft background music, elegant table settings, was now swallowed by sudden silence. More than 300 guests, business people, the Whitmore family's partners, friends, relatives from far away, all lifted their heads, looking around, not understanding what was happening. Some laughed, thinking it was part of a performance. Others whispered, irritation clearly on their faces. Then the second text arrived. "The decorative lights are off. Only the emergency lights are on. People are standing up, chaotic. I opened my eyes. Mark watched me, his face reflecting the dim light from my phone. "It started," I whispered. In my mind, I pictured the bright lights going out row by row. From the ceiling down the sides of the hall, the sparkling strings of lights, the ones Meline had said must look cinematic, now nothing more than dark pieces of glass. Under the cold white glow of emergency lighting, everyone's panic was more visible. Unease seeped into every whisper. These guests, so used to polished, high-class events, were now looking at each other with confusion and irritation. Chelsea texted, "The staff have stopped service. They're all standing still on command. No appetizers are going out." I pictured the young waitstaff in their neat black and white uniforms, standing frozen like statues. No smiles, no polite bows, no champagne refills. And in a luxury wedding, that alone was a loud signal that something enormous was happening. An older guest likely lost patience, standing up and shouting, "What is going on? Get the manager here immediately!" Chairs scraped, voices rose, heels clicked on tile, a storm of noise swelling in the hall, all surging toward Meline, my daughter, standing in the center like someone stripped of her crown in front of everyone. Chelsea's fourth text came, "Meline is standing in the center, pale. She's asking the staff who authorized this. No one is answering." I could imagine her face. The same daughter who once beamed with joy on her college graduation day, who once ran to hug me when she got her first job. Now trembling, eyes wide with terror. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand, because she believed power and wealth were what controlled the world. She forgot one thing. Tonight, every glass, every rose, every strip of silk was paid for with my money. The fifth message arrived, longer. "Andrew is yelling at the staff. He says he'll call his lawyer. But Manager Harris just walked in. He showed Andrew the contract and pointed at the name, yours." I stared at the screen, unusually calm. Some truths don't require shouting, just a signature. I pictured Andrew grabbing the contract, reading my name on every page, then perhaps looking around, searching for backup from his family. But the truth was too clear, too sharp, leaving no one able to save him from the humiliation spreading across the hall like spilled oil. Then Chelsea sent, "Mrs. Whitmore, she opened your email." I sat upright. My heart beat lightly but steadily, no twisting pain now. Mark leaned toward me, almost holding his breath. Then the final message in that sequence appeared. "She's frozen. Her hands are shaking. Her face is white. People beside her are asking what's wrong." She handed her phone to her husband. He looked at it, then looked at Andrew, like he wants to crush him. I exhaled, a long breath I had been holding for weeks. The Whitmore family, who mocked me, looked down on me, orchestrated my humiliation at the gate, lost their dignity in just a few minutes. I didn't feel triumphant. Truly, I didn't feel joy reading those texts. What rose inside me wasn't arrogant victory, but deep relief. Like finally, the truth had been forced to speak after being buried so long. I imagined Margaret Whitmore standing at her table, hands shaking, reading each invoice, each contract I sent. Every paid by Evelyn Carter, cutting into her pride like cold metal. I imagined Andrew turning to the bride, my daughter, just as stunned. His pride ripped away in front of 300 people. And I knew, at that very moment, the Whitmores finally understood something they never expected. The woman they humiliated was the only reason they had the wedding that was now falling apart before their eyes. Then Chelsea texted a sentence that made my hand pause above the screen. Meline is crying. She's asking, "Who did this?" I stared at the words, my heart tightening. My daughter was crying. That moment didn't make me waver, but it did bring a sharp ache to the part of me that was still a mother. I had given birth to her. I had raised her through the hardest years. And now I was the one pulling the cloth off the truth at the wedding she treated as her life's dream. But I didn't regret it. I had been silent too long. I had let her believe there were no consequences. I had let myself be treated as an extra in the life I built for her. If tonight she had to stand under cold emergency lighting, facing 300 questioning eyes, then that was the only lesson she would listen to. I put the phone down. Mark squeezed my shoulder. "Are you all right?" I nodded, and for the first time my eyes were no longer wet. All right, for the first time. Truly all right. Outside the window, the lights of Ohio shimmered like quiet dots, as if reminding me that life was bigger than the pain Meline caused. And in that rare moment, I knew. The storm I unleashed wasn't to destroy her. It was to let her see what she had lost by letting arrogance lead her. Tonight the lights at the wedding went out, but the light inside me, for the first time in a long while, turned back on. I was sitting at the edge of the bed, my heart settling like calm water after the strongest wind of my life, when my phone vibrated violently. The screen lit up with the caller's name, Meline. I stared at it for a long time. Mark stood behind me, his eyes gentle but sad, as if he knew exactly what I was about to face. When I pressed answer, I heard my daughter's ragged breaths, the chaotic noise behind her, people shouting, management being called, chairs scraping. Then Meline burst into tears, sobbing, Mom, please help me." I closed my eyes, not from pain, but because I realized I had been waiting for this call, not out of satisfaction, but out of closure. "Meline," I said, my voice strangely calm, "there's nothing to save." It was as if she had been struck in the chest. "What do you mean?" A minute ago, everything was normal. Then suddenly, the lights went off, the staff left, the email came. Everyone is looking at me like you lied to them, I said. Like you made up a story about your in-laws' generosity. Like you turned your own mother into a poor maid to be kept outside the gate. Meline sniffled, her voice shrinking. "Mom, I didn't think it would end up like this. I just wanted everything to look perfect. The Whitmore family, they have very high standards, and I spoke softly, but not gently. You put their standards above your own family, above your parents, above the mother who kept you alive through the hardest years of your life." Silence, only her quiet sobbing. I continued, "Meline, do you remember you told me to cut all our relatives because they did nothing for your future? You banned us from the ceremony area to preserve the image. You allowed them to hang a sign banning your own parents at the entrance." "No. Mom, you also said," I emphasized, "that you were ashamed people would know your mother once worked at a laundromat. Do you remember that?" Medeline's breath hitched, like she couldn't get air. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said, "and you never apologized." Behind her voice, I heard someone yank the phone. Andrew's voice exploded, angry and arrogant. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You ruined our wedding, you—" "No," I cut in, my voice calm to the point of being cold. "I only turned off the things I paid for, the things your family took credit for without paying a single cent." "You're insane," Andrew yelled. "You'll pay for this. I'll sue you for causing serious damages." I laughed softly, a thin, paper-like sound. It silenced him for several seconds. "Sue me?" I asked. "You're going to sue me because I turned off the sound, the lights, and the service at the wedding I paid for." Do you want to review the contract, Andrew? My name is on every line. I paid every invoice. I have the right to stop everything at any moment. And I spoke slowly. I also have audio files of you bragging to your friends that your family paid for everything, that the bride's side is dirt poor. I heard Andrew choke up, then the sound of him muttering a curse. You will pay for this." "No," I said. "My daughter is the one who will pay, not me." Meline grabbed the phone back, breathing hard like she had been running, her voice shaking violently. "Mom, please stop. I'm begging you." That plea, if it had been 2 weeks earlier, I might have burst into tears. But now I saw one very clear truth. She only begged when she was exposed, not when she did wrong. "Meline," I said, my voice lowering, almost a whisper. "Today, I did not ruin your wedding. You ruined it yourself. You belittled your parents. You deceived your guests. You built your dream on humiliating the people who raised you, and you thought you would never have to pay for it. Mom, please, don't say that. This," I said, "is a lesson about consequences. You can hate me for the rest of your life, but you will never forget tonight." Behind her, I heard hundreds of guests murmuring, people calling for staff, Mrs. Whitmore raising her voice at someone, Andrew slamming his hand on a table. Everything, like the distant echo of a world I had just stepped out of and had no intention of returning to. Meline sobbed so hard she could barely form words. "I need you. Right now, I don't know what to do." "You did not need me," I said. "When you erased me from your life, when you hung that sign, when you were ashamed of where you came from. So now you must stand on your own feet." "Mom." I closed my eyes and said the final sentence I knew would carve itself into this night like a cut. "I cannot save someone who does not want to save herself." I lowered the phone from my ear. "Mom!" Her voice cracked with panic. "Don't hang up. I'm begging you." I didn't let her finish. I pressed the end call button. The screen returned to silence. But I didn't stop there. I opened settings and blocked all calls and messages from Meline, from Andrew, and from the entire Whitmore family. When I set the phone down, I felt Mark place his hand on my back. He didn't say anything. He just squeezed my shoulder, a squeeze strong enough to tell me I wasn't alone. That night, for the first time in many years, I pulled the blanket over myself and laid my head on the pillow without feeling my heart sink. I didn't toss and turn, replaying painful words in my head. I didn't think about the sign at the gate. I didn't think about Meline's face. I didn't think about the chaos at the party. I only thought one thing. At last, I had stepped out of the cycle of endurance that once felt endless, and I slept. A deep, peaceful sleep, without dreams, without heaviness. The best sleep I had had in many years. 6 months passed since that night the lights went out. A night I still remember in every detail, not because of pain, but because it marked the moment I walked out of a life I had trapped myself in for far too long. Time didn't blur the memory. Instead, it revealed the truth of everything, especially of people. Rumors about the failed wedding spread faster than anything I had ever seen. In the first weeks, a local paper even ran a mocking piece about a luxurious wedding plunged into darkness, though they didn't know half the truth behind it. Guests traded stories in half-whispered loops, and the Whitmore name, once their badge of honor, started being spoken with disdain. In the local business community, their reputation nearly collapsed. The gossip circled around how they borrowed prestige, showed off, and lived off someone else's money. Andrew's mother, Margaret, who once walked into every event with the arrogance of someone who owned the room, now appeared far less often. And when she did, people said she bowed her head more than she lifted it. I didn't feel triumphant hearing any of this. Every downfall has its own cost, and I never wished for others to pay just so I could be happy. But I understood that some lessons in life are only learned through loss. As for Madeline and Andrew, they were still married. The wedding became a joke, but the marriage license was still valid. Yet their lives were nothing like the luxury they once imagined. The Whitmore family cut off all financial support, blaming the wedding scandal for embarrassing them. Andrew lost some key partners. With his reputation stained, he walked into meetings with a much lower posture than before. No one said it outright, but they understood. A man who cannot stand on his own will never earn real respect. Madeline, from what I heard, struggled to keep even a sliver of her image in her husband's family. She had to start working earlier than she planned. She had to track expenses, measure every part of their budget. No more fancy dinners, no more expensive clothing, no more luxury weekend trips, and no more respect from the Whitmores. The same people who once praised her when she first met Andrew now looked at her like an outsider. They saw her as the faint shadow of a mistake. And Madeline tried to hold herself together, but she grew more worn and frail by the day. One early June afternoon, with summer wind blowing across the porch, I was watering my pots of sunflowers when I heard a car stop at the gate. Mark was in his office. Only I stepped out. A worn sedan door opened, and Madeline got out. She had noticeably lost weight. Her once shiny blonde hair was dry and split, tied in a rush. Her clothes were no longer the elaborate style she used to prefer. Her face carried dark circles, her eyes tired as though she had cried through many nights. She stood at the gate, looking at me like someone staring at a stranger she no longer knew how to approach. "Mom," her voice was hoarse, "can you come outside and talk to me for a moment?" I opened the gate but held my distance, not coldly, but enough for her to know the past could not be erased like chalk. Madeline burst into tears immediately, as if my presence alone unlocked everything she had held back for months. "Mom, I'm sorry. I can't take it anymore." She fell to her knees right on the gravel path, burying her face in her hands. "I lost everything. Everything. I have no one to talk to. I have no one on my side anymore. Please, Mom, forgive me. I need you." I leaned down and set my hand lightly on her shoulder, but didn't rush to comfort her. "Madeline," I said slowly, "you didn't lose me. You only lost the right to assume I would endure forever." She looked up, her red eyes filled with hope. "Mom, I'll do anything. I just need you to hold me, just once." My heart ached with the instinct of a mother. I had wilted for years out of fear of losing her, but today I understood something else. Love does not mean allowing someone to hurt you endlessly. Sometimes love means standing far enough away for them to see their own mistakes. "Madeline," I said softly, "forgiveness isn't something people receive by asking. Forgiveness is something they earn through action. I'm not closing the door on you, but I won't open it all the way just because of a tearful apology." She went still. In the past, whenever I spoke gently, Madeline often answered with a pout or an irritated tone, but today she only bowed her head. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll come back when I deserve to." She stood, wiped her tears with her sleeve. And as she walked away, her figure shrinking down the familiar road, she looked like a child realizing for the first time that the world did not revolve around her. 1 month after that, Mark and I sold the business. The laundromat that had been our family's livelihood for 30 years had become a symbol of the life I had stepped out of. We sold it to a sweet young couple who promised to keep the shop's name out of respect for the generations who built it. With the money, we moved into a small home near the beaches of North Carolina. The sound of waves every evening made me feel as though I was getting back breaths that life had taken from me for too long. I met with my lawyer again. This time, not in pain or anger, but clarity. The new will was adjusted. All assets would be transferred to a fund supporting older women seeking independence after leaving toxic families. Not a single dollar would go to Meline, unless she proved through time and consistent action that she had changed. Mr. Jackson nodded after reading it. Evelyn, this is not the decision of a cold mother. This is the decision of someone who finally knows how to love in the right way. I knew he was right. The most surprising part was what happened after everything fell apart. My family, the same people Meline erased from her guest list, returned to me more than ever. Linda called me every week. The little nieces and nephews sent hand-drawn letters of the ocean, asking when they could visit. Old friends stopped by, filling the house with laughter. And I realized that the people who truly loved me had never left. I had simply been blinded by the love I poured into a child who didn't value it. One evening, Mark and I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink into the sea, the deep orange fading into soft purple. Mark said, "Do you feel lighter now?" I nodded. Not just lighter, I feel free. For the first time in years. Free from expectations, free from the fear of losing my child, free from feeling I had to be endlessly good just to be loved, free to live the life I spent too many years building for others. And as the ocean breeze brushed past me, I closed my eyes and smiled, not because the past was beautiful, but because I knew I had stepped into the most beautiful part of my own life. From the porch overlooking the sea each evening, I realize life has moments that force us to look deeply at ourselves. I once believed that if I loved my child unconditionally, every wound could be forgiven. But love without respect is just a shackle wrapped in pretty paper. It makes us forget ourselves, shrink ourselves, sacrifice until we break, and still never be enough. I spent too many years living that way. Now looking back, I understand that leaving someone you love is not always the absence of love. Sometimes it is the only way to save yourself from drowning. It hurts, yes, but not every pain is bad. Some pain opens a door. And for me, that door was the night the wedding lights went out. Since the day Meline came begging for forgiveness and then quietly left, I haven't received another call or message. But strangely, my heart no longer waits, no longer hopes for an explanation, no longer hopes for anything that might drag me back into the fragile woman I used to be. Some relationships can only heal when both sides try. If only one side looks back, apologizes, or repairs. That is not family. That is a spiral of exhaustion. I do not hate Meline. Even though I close the door, my heart still hopes that someday, not through tears or apologies, but through long-term change and real actions, she will show me she's grown. But if that day never comes, I will not hurt anymore. I have already saved myself. Now every morning I walk along the beach, picking up a few shells still wet from the tide, listening to the waves like a lullaby from a new life. In the afternoon, I sit at the nearby community center, talking with older women trapped in toxic families, women who were once versions of me. I listen to them cry, then quietly offer them the courage I paid a very high price to find. I realized that the most meaningful thing in my life wasn't paying for a wedding or putting my child through college, but helping other women see their worth. The thing I once desperately wished someone would help me see. Anyone who writes, leaves a message, or asks me to share my story, I read everything. Each note reminds me I am not alone, and none of us ever truly are. Family. I learned this far too late, but just in time, is not necessarily made of blood. Family is the people who stay when you fall. Family is the ones who never make you feel small. Family is the ones who speak your name with kindness, not contempt. And now, as you sit somewhere listening to this story, I want to ask you something sincere. Where are you listening from? And have you ever felt overlooked by your own family or had to stand up to protect your dignity? If you have, I hope you leave a few words in the comments, not for me, but for the other women who read them, the ones still suffering silently so they know they are not alone. Thank you, truly thank you, for being here, for listening to the journey of an ordinary mother like me. Every minute you spend with this story matters to me more than you can imagine. And if you want to continue walking with me with stories about the quiet strength of middle-aged and older women, then please follow the channel and leave a like. It isn't an obligation. It's simply a way of saying you're still here and that stories of healing like this still have a place in your heart. Thank you for staying with me to the end. I wish you peace, and I hope you too will find your own freedom.